Well, thank you so much for coming out, and thank you. I know a lot of friends have reached out that they're gonna watch the recording, so I want to give them a shout out too. Thank you for tuning in. Um, should I introduce us first?
Sure.
Okay. My name's Maggie Skierbeck. I recognize a lot of you. I've been coming to Boulevard, I think almost 4 years now, 3 or 4 years. My husband attends. He'll be walking in late. I think that's probably my baby. You hear crying. I have 3 kids, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And I love the Boulevard. There's Josh. Shout out to Josh. He has Halloween candy for everybody. I love coming here. I love that the Boulevard says yes when we propose having things like this and just being a little bit brave and bold and talking about things that can sometimes feel overwhelming or scary or fill in the blank. So I'm happy to be here.
My name is Bill Swears. My wife and I have been going to Boulevard for a couple of years as well, a couple of kids as well. Echoing a lot of the same things that Maggie's been saying. This is an issue that we kind of saw developing. It came to Ben in end of last year. It's kind of said, raised concerns that that this seems like something that the church should be responding to. And so we'll talk a little bit more about immigration task force that we formed, but we did a talk like this back in March, and then felt like it was time again to kind of just raise a lot of the same talking points we said back in March, but now a lot more things have happened since March. So it felt like it was time to have this conversation again. So thanks for coming tonight. Thanks for your interest.
So I'll open us in prayer, and then we'll really get started. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing this group together tonight. Please help us to have this conversation in a way that glorifies you and works towards reconciliation and righteousness, and that we don't contribute to ugliness or divisiveness that is so prevalent around us. Help us to seek and speak the truth when politics feel volatile, when we're witnessing human suffering, when we feel like we don't know where to turn or what to trust, when we don't know how to talk to our friends and family about what we're seeing in this country. Lord, turn our eyes to you. We need you. Our country needs you. Our leadership, locally and in Washington, they need you. This church and this neighborhood need you. I know that all the people in this room probably and hopefully voted so differently from one another, yet just by being here, we know that we all care about the vulnerable and we feel called to shoulder up to our frightened and vulnerable neighbors. Lord, help us to stay together as your church. Help us to choose unity for the body of Christ and the health of the church and for your glory, most importantly. We also ask for your protection over our immigrant neighbors near and far. There's a lot of unrest and fear and anxiety. Lord, would you grant our neighbors the peace that passes all understanding? We ask all of this and trust it to you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so we already told you a little bit about what we're up to here at the Boulevard related to immigration, but I wanted to just run through some bullet points of what we've accomplished. So Bill and I, like he mentioned, we did a 2-part presentation series back in March. And since then, so many people here at the Boulevard have come together to accomplish a lot. So I thought I'd take a moment and acknowledge that. We're supporting a family of 3 in the affected community. This looks like support financially, though that's really tapering off as they gain independence. Here in Michigan, in service time, a lot of us drive them to work and to different appointments and things. And then mostly, I think, just with friendship and community. We just had a big bash in Josh and my barn in Hudsonville to get the group together just to celebrate what we've done together and kind of look to the future and just enjoy each other. And that family was there as well as a bunch of their friends. We were able to help with funding to secure green cards For two members of the community, they came to America as refugees. They were facing really significant persecution for their belief in Jesus in Bangladesh. And it was really kind of beautiful how our paths crossed. Somebody here at the Boulevard ordered pizza, and the DoorDash driver was one of those people, and we were able to connect, and their green cards were filed, which cost almost $9,000. So it's not something, they've been working really hard just to stay afloat. So it wasn't something they could afford, and we were able to make that happen. And Bill will talk about it, but it feels like just in the nick of time because people waiting to file for green cards have been, subject to deportation. So we're really thankful that God brought those two people to Boulevard's literal doors. And then we're tossing around the idea of offering a Bible study. So I thought I'd tease it. We're still kind of looking for somebody to help lead it, but a small group of us, I think Rachel here, Bill, and I, and some others, I think Josie's been reading through it, to just kind of gauge if it's a good fit, and I think we feel like it is. So we're looking for maybe January for that. So we really just want to bring people back to the Word when there's a lot of chaos about the subject around us. What else? And then just looking forward to the future, we're kind of trying to figure out what our group looks like. A lot of it is like the day-to-day support of people in the community, but we want to toss around ideas of maybe regular monthly meetings where we can just get together and like cry and lament about things and just be together. So look out for more on that, or come up after this and talk to me. I'm kind of the more relational one in the task force. Bill is very smart on details and current events and things like that. And I'm good at bringing us together. You are too. But so talk to me after if you want to get involved. Any questions? These are out of order. That's okay. We'll roll with it. Okay. So before we move on, as I thought about our presentation from last March until now, I've just been observing Christians in my life, Christians across the country, and I feel like it's time for a little bit of a step back and reframe and remind people what we're really talking about first and foremost is people made in the image of God so lovingly who are moving from one place to another. And I think a lot of that gets lost in the conversation. Obviously, it's important to talk about all the laws and law enforcement and border enforcement, politics, all of that's important, and Bill has a lot to cover on it. But I just want to really set this stage. We're talking about people, and if we can all remember that, I think we're better for it. I think about a book I read to my kids way too often because they demand it, and I read it too much. But it just says, seeing people as God sees them changes everything. And every time I read those words, I get a little choked up. So I just want to set the stage here with that reminder. And then I have just a few other things to make sure we're entering this in the right posture. Just a reminder about the power of prayer. It's really easy to remember to pray for our loved ones and ourselves in our day-to-day, but just want to remind people to pray for our leaders, whether we like what they're up to or not. We are told in scripture to pray for them, and it really does matter. And then also to pray for our communities. Just to address the elephant in the room, and I prayed many, many times that the group here today would be a really diverse one, and I'm hoping that we all bring different perspectives here. And I just want to remind everybody that we're not called to be apolitical, but we are called to be nonpartisan, especially in things like this. So I just want to say, Bill and I are coming at this from a nonpartisan perspective, but it is inherently political. So we're not here to endorse any specific political parties or candidates. We're not here to prescribe specific policy, but we are here to encourage engagement in politics, both locally and nationally. And then I also just want to say, we may provide information tonight that I at least sometimes feel like a little bit of it's like grinding against my preconceived notions, or I sometimes feel a little bit of a rub when I learn new things. So I just want to say that might happen, and I want to encourage everybody just to have openness and curiosity and ask questions. We did put note cards on the tables. If you're planning on coming next Sunday and you have questions that maybe you don't want to pose to the whole group, feel free to jot them down there, or just your thoughts. I just want to make sure everyone's open and curious. And then I'll start to move a little quicker because it's already 4:15. But this is an important one. We believe God calls us to a deep love for the vulnerable, the marginalized, and the forgotten. And then also, we are called to be peacemakers, not peacekeepers, but peacemakers. We're surrounded by a lot of conflict and a lot of people potentially benefiting from that conflict and that division. And so, just a reminder that we are called to move towards that. In a way, not avoiding the conflict, but approaching it with compassion and openness and truth, and not kind of adding more fuel to it. And this is a big one. Our allegiance is to one, our true king, not a political party, not a government, not an empire. And I added this quote in here because it spoke to me, and I thought maybe it would speak to you guys. If you feel politically homeless, like you don't fully belong to any party, that's a healthy sign. It likely means your conscience is being held captive by the gospel, not a political platform. Your citizenship is in heaven. You're an ambassador, and an ambassador is never entirely at home in a foreign land. Another reminder for all of us today is to love our neighbor. And who exactly is our neighbor? Lucky for us, we have Jesus's actual words here when he was asked the question. Oh. My notes are. Here we are. Do I feel like I need to read this whole thing, or are we short on time? What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, read it.
Okay. I guess it's not something I should skip. Jesus' own words. And who is my neighbor? Then Jesus answered and said, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise, a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn. So which of these three do you think was neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? And he said, he who showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. Sorry, these got a little shuffled, so I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything. I also just wanted to point out Matthew 12, verse 30 through 31. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. And then one last reminder, because I feel like I need this daily. It's a quote from Russell Moore. Weep, yes, grieve, be angered, work for reform, but don't get cynical, don't get demoralized, don't give up. The gospel is real, the stories are true. Christ is risen and Jesus saves. That's reason enough to keep standing. Because I know those of us who are paying attention, it can be heavy on a daily basis. So I just wanted to encourage us if you're feeling that way. You're not alone. And I would say look around the room. It's just so nice to know that no matter how you voted, how you're coming to this space, I know that something has been kind of lit up inside you. And I'm just really happy to see that people are here and people showed up. Any thoughts or anything so far from anyone? Questions? Okay, so we wanted to make sure we structured this presentation in a way that we really looked at what does the Bible say about immigration, and then Bill will follow up with some current event updates. We are, like I said, going to offer that Bible study, so we'll do a much deeper dive into this. But I did highlight a few things which, coincidentally enough, if you were at services this morning, Shamari brought up almost all of these, which was a good little connection. But I thought I'd put some examples of how God used the movement of people throughout Scripture. Genesis 12, God told Abram to leave his country for a new home. The book of Ruth, notable for a lot of reasons, but specifically its focus on migration. She was forced and she was obedient in leaving her home due to famine, moved to a new place, and this really was critical to the rest of the story. Matthew 4, just a great example of how Jesus's broader ministry really relied on him moving from place to place. And then Matthew, when Mary, Joseph, and Jesus fled danger at the hand of King Herod. So a little bit of scripture to kind of root us a little bit before we go into current events. Matthew 25, 35 through 40 tells us that when we show care for others, we show care for him. Proverbs 31:8 tells us to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. Leviticus tells us not to mistreat foreigners in our land, and I think it's interesting that in Deuteronomy and Exodus you find really similar language. And then there is just a continual reminder from God to the ancient Israelites to treat others as they would want to be treated, since they had a long history of being migrants, exiles, and refugees. And it was hard for me to because when you really dig into this, there's so much scripture that touches on this. So I listed a few more with the idea that we'll follow up and send these slides out if anyone wants to really dive into their Bibles. It's like playing a game to try to find my slides on here because they're really shuffled. We may not have this one.
That's me. That's when I start.
It is? I wrote all kinds of notes of things I wanted
yeah.
to say. Okay, well, you don't have a slide then for this, so we'll. Do you want to just talk about it then? Oh yeah.
I'm ready.
Perfect.
So I'm going to change gears a little bit and start talking about immigration law in America and then kind of where we are now as a country. So first and foremost, immigration is really complicated. There's been a long history of back and forth of immigration policy in the U.S. That reflects the culture at the time. So there's a labor shortage during World War II. The U.S. is very welcoming to Mexican migrants. And then in 1954, they enacted what's called Operation Wetback, which was this aggressive program of deportations. 5,000 people were deported the first day. 1 million people were deported over the year. That was, 15 years after welcoming and saying we need more, migrant labor here. So although the country of origin changes over time, it's almost always the poor, persecuted and the poor that are seeking opportunity and safety when they come. There's a lot of different ways to enter the U.S. and many different temporary programs, often created in response to a specific crisis. So just some key terms to know. A member is a citizen is a member of a country. That's someone either born in the U.S. or they apply after getting a green card. A migrant is someone who moves from another country, either temporary or permanent. An immigrant is a person who moves from one country to another country permanently. A green card is an official document that lets a person live and work in the U.S. And that's after being either sponsored by a family, employer, visa lottery, asylee, refugee, victim advocacy. You see there's a lot of different ways to enter the U.S. A visa is a document or a stamp on a passport that lets someone stay or leave for reasons like tourism, business, study. And then a work permit is something that allows a person to work legally in a country for a certain period of time. It's often required if someone is not a citizen or a permanent resident. Just one other note about the green card. The average time is about 3 to 5 years to get citizenship after you get your green card. So this slide is a little inaccurate. So start with refugee, someone who's unable to return to their country of origin due to a well-founded fear of persecution due to their religion, sexual orientation, or political beliefs. And then asylum is also a permanent way to come into the country, not a temporary permission structure. And the only difference between asylum and refugee is where you are when you want to claim asylum, I should say. So a refugee does it from their home country, or oftentimes it's actually a third country because their home country is so unsafe. There's a vetting process to become a refugee. It takes interviews, background checks, and typically takes about 2 years on average to complete that process. And it also requires a U.S. sponsor. So they're in their home country or another country. They go through this 2-year process, and then someone in the U.S. agrees, yes, I will help them get settled and acclimated when they arrive in the U.S. And how many refugees we take every year varies from year to year. The executive branch of the government sets a target every year for how many refugees will be accepted. And then after a year of being a refugee, you can apply for a green card. So the criteria to claim asylum are the same. It's fear of persecution due to religion, sexual orientation, or political beliefs. The only difference is you cannot apply for asylum from your home country. You have to be physically present either at the border or already in the country. So when people are arriving at the port of entry to claim asylum, that is the only process to do that. And then so some of these, there's also these temporary programs. So humanitarian parole, temporary protected status, DACA, which you guys have probably heard of, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Another term is Dreamers. That was a program that was started underneath the Obama administration for kids that came. They were minors when they arrived, so their parents brought them through no decision of their own, and now they're here. And so that is a temporary program. Every 3-4 years they have to reapply to maintain their DACA status. If they commit a crime or they somehow violate the criteria for that, they are deported. And then also victims of crime, human trafficking, and abuse is another permanent program. So then also under these temporary permission, you need a work visa in order to be able to work in the U.S. So, we talked about asylum seeker. That's someone in the U.S. already here or arriving at a port of entry seeking protection on the same grounds. Talked about humanitarian parole and then temporary protected status. So one other part of the asylum seeker process, it starts with what's called a credible fear interview. So you say, I want to claim asylum, and then you get an appointment to meet with an immigration judge or an immigration officer, and they do an interview to decide how credible your claim is to say, I can't return to my home country. As of June of this year, there's 2.4 million people in the U.S. with pending asylum claims, and the average wait time for the asylum approval is 3 to 5 years. And then regarding humanitarian parole, some examples are Uniting for Ukraine. This was for people coming here as a result of the conflict in Ukraine. And then Operations Allies Welcome is another humanitarian parole program that was started in response for people displaced with the Afghan conflict. So you can see that there's a lot of humanitarian parole programs that are really great reasons. These are people who are in war-torn areas and looking for relief. During the Biden administration, just for sense of scale, 2.86 million people were admitted to the U.S. under humanitarian parole. Another term to know is a sponsor. This is a person or an organization that supports and takes responsibility for someone coming to live in the country, helping them through the immigration process. At the beginning of 2024, there were 2 million sponsors in the U.S. This is like Bethany Christian Services, Samaritas, churches. A lot of churches do this work as well. Another term to know is expedited removal. This is a process by where an immigration officer or a judge can deport someone without a hearing if they enter the U.S. illegally or have fraudulent documentation. So this process has always been in place. Historically, the criteria were this fraudulent documentation. The only people who were eligible for expedited removal were people within 100 miles of the border and also had been in the country less than 2 weeks. So it's important to note here, immigration judges are not what we think of typically as judges. They're not fall under the judicial branch, they fall underneath the executive branch. So they're employed by the DOJ. Pam Bondi is their boss. And so whatever the DOJ or the Attorney General dictates as far as policies around immigration, that's what they follow. So they're not an independent branch. So if the DOJ is pushing for expedited removals, that's the rules that they're expected to follow. Moving on. So immigration status is the legal status of a person living in the country. So citizenship, permanent residency, or on a temporary visa. And then documented versus undocumented is another term that's thrown around a lot. Historically, what documented meant is a person who has legal papers that allow them to live and work in a country or somewhere in the process of seeking asylum. And we've used the term undocumented to refer to someone who's in the country without legal papers or permission to stay. But that term undocumented is really misleading. There's a lot of people in the country who have documents. They're in the system. The government's aware of them, but they're not authorized to be here. So much better term to use is unauthorized versus authorized. Because someone can be in the country, be unauthorized, and have documentation or not have documentation. Yeah. So what's changed this year? January of this year ushered in a new national leadership for the United States. And with that came abrupt and immediate drops in how many people are allowed in and a huge increase in deportations. There's been a lot going on this year. New policies enacted, lawsuits, because either ACLU or other groups that have standing will sue. It goes through the appeals. And so it's been really complicated, and there's been a lot going on to try and follow. But generally, the approach of the executive branch of the government, DHS, has been to enact new policies and then wait to see if they get challenged in court. The courts have been slow to react and allowing DHS and ICE, CBP the ability to be very disruptive before being stopped. Just for a sense of context, the Trump administration currently has 92 pending lawsuits challenging their immigration policies. So you get a sense of just how disruptive the new policies have been. So to kind of summarize what's been happening this year, separated things out into three buckets: refugee resettlement, asylum in the border, and then deportations and interior enforcement. So under refugee resettlement, earlier this year there was an immediate cancellation and suspension of refugee resettlements, including 100,000 applicants that were already vetted and approved. In January, 10,000 flights were canceled overnight for people who already had their flights here ready to arrive and were told stay. There was a stop work order on all refugee resettlement services, even for those nearly 22,000 refugees already on soil, U.S. soil. So Bethany Christian Services and Samaritas and these others, refugee resettlement agencies lost federal funding. And so they're really struggling now too. And so refugees that were here, they're working on being settled, lost all the support that they had in order to acclimate here. Also, the one big beautiful bill cut SNAP and healthcare benefits to all refugees and asylees. And again, refugees and asylees, so an asylee is someone who's already gotten asylum status. So these are people that have been vetted, they're here legally, and they're in the process of working towards that green card and then ultimately citizenship. But that can take 10 years between getting your green card and then applying for citizenship. It's a long process. Also under refugee resettlement, so let's talk about this earlier a little bit. Every year the president sets a refugee admissions target, just for a sense of scale. So the fiscal year goes from October to October. So this last month of October started fiscal year 26. So from ending in the fiscal year that ended in October of this year, the refugee target was 125,000 people. For the upcoming year, it'll be 7,500. So a huge drop in how many refugees we're accepting. The president has already explicitly said his goal is that almost all of those will be white Afrikaners. And in fact, the first group of Afrikaners came in this year in May. And again, we're talking about the typical refugee process is 2 years. These people arrived after about a 3-month process. So much more fast-tracked now this year. And this graph just shows, you can see this starts in 1980. This was when President Carter signed in the Refugee Act. And you can see over time, depending on who's in the White House, you can see there's been ups and downs for how many refugees are accepted every year.
We don't see your graph.
Oh, that's my fault.
So, you have the graph.
Thank
There
you.
it is.
I was so intrigued by it.
Yeah, so a huge peak up in 1980, drop during the 80s. As you can see, this huge drop here. This is during the first Trump administration. President Biden restored it back up to 125,000 a year, and then we're here at this end. You see a huge drop again.
Can
So,
I say something about
yeah.
that real quick? So in next week's session, we'll talk about who typically makes up the group of refugees that come here. And I'm forgetting the number off the top of my head, but it's in next week's presentation about how many persecuted Christians that includes. And so I think that's obviously as Christians we care about everybody, but it is interesting to see the breakdown that it is a lot of people like our friends who came here with a pizza. Who came here because they were being persecuted for their belief.
So I have that stat. So
Oh,
nearly
you do? Oh.
there's nearly a quarter of all refugees admitted to the U.S. last year were Christians from the top 50 countries persecuting Christians. Half of those waiting for resettlement are women and children living in unsafe conditions. So usually, again, when you talk about refugees, they're not able to stay in their country of origin. They're usually in a third country waiting for this refugee process to carry out. So the second bucket is asylum and the border. So nearly 1 million people who were here on parole status had that status revoked, making them immediately eligible for deportation. The government has also slowed the process of approving green cards for refugees and asylees. So that was that 3 to 5 year process is even longer now. There was reports that the government is even trying to deport green card holders for criticizing the government. But that was deemed unconstitutional since they are, the other term for green card is legal permanent residents. So these people who have been vetted and approved to be working their way towards full citizenship. Also, border encounters have dropped to essentially zero.
Can I say something again?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I won't make a habit. Just to get back to our reminder that we're talking about people, I just want to touch on that first bullet point. I just want to put it out plainly. People who came here following the legal process at the time, followed everything they were supposed to do, made their appointments, waited years for the appointment at the border, were granted asylum status, were taken to, various places across the country, started a life there. And then because of one executive order, they were deemed unauthorized, their status. So I just like to paint that picture because I think a lot of people don't understand the different buckets of immigrants, and it tends to just be all illegal immigrants, but these are people who followed the law at the time.
Yeah, so just a great point. Yeah.
Separate question. So why were judges able to stop the green card problem, but they can't, you said there's 92 lawsuits that have to do that one, but not necessarily do some of the other topics?
Yeah, great question. So that one I think moved faster through the appeal process. The other thing that's been happening is, so the process is a policy is enacted, a group like the ACLU will sue, that goes to appeal. There's been over 20 times now that the federal government has requested what's called emergency relief, meaning we want the Supreme Court to rule on this. And I think 20 out of 22 times the Supreme Court has granted and upheld and agreed with the federal government. So most of the time, and so the problem with this emergency appeal, it's called the emergency docket or sometimes called the shadow docket. What's been happening over the summer is Supreme Court's technically not in session. They're not making a full ruling. They're not having a full hearing on these things. They're just saying, yes, we agree with the appeal, or we uphold the appeal, basically saying we turn down the initial judgment. Because the president, this is across all of it's just been 92 lawsuits related to immigration. There's actually hundreds of lawsuits against the executive branch of the government right now, from across various other areas. And so what's coming up on the Supreme Court is to have a full hearing on some of these things. And so if the Supreme Court declines not to hear the appeal, then the appeal is upheld. And so much of that is, there's the term standing, meaning where is that lawsuit being brought and who is that judge that's overhearing that case. And those judges are part of the judicial branch, right? So they are separate than immigration judges. But that's the reason why you get this mixed bag of like sometimes they're decided quickly, sometimes they're languishing. Just for example, the birthright citizenship lawsuit is going to be decided in this upcoming Supreme Court session. So they're in the middle of that now, and that goes all the way till June. So between now and June, there's going to be a bunch of huge Supreme Court hearings about deciding a lot of these things.
This last bullet point, again, just to bring us back to the human element of this, border encounters have dropped to essentially zero. That is received in a variety of ways, but I think we should see that as the suffering have not disappeared. The people who are coming to the border for a variety of reasons, most of which are to escape something or seek human flourishing, those people didn't disappear.
So another graph here, but this overlays, again, fiscal year starts in October, you can see that. This is the number of encounters that we've had at the border every year. You can see it peaked at 300,000 in December of 24. The Biden administration started enacting policies to regulate more encounters at the border. And just to be clear, an encounter doesn't mean that's someone who entered the U.S. That's someone who just presents at the border. We did not have 300,000 people come into the country in December of 2024, but there were 300,000 encounters. And for a long time, the DHS did not distinguish between people who came in versus just encounters. You can see, just to get a sense of scale, over 2024, that number still started slowly decreasing, and then this red line at the bottom is started in October of 2024. You can see where we are now since February. It's been essentially zero. And yeah, just to echo what Maggie said, the people who, when you think about 300,000 presented at the border seeking temporary permission to come in or parole status or seeking asylum, those humanitarian crises haven't gone away. People in Venezuela and in other parts of the world where there's conflict are still in those situations. We haven't done anything to address those humanitarian crises.
And I think an important part of the conversation is when people talk about the border being open versus closed, I don't know that people, even including myself, some of the intricacies of it, I don't know that people understand really what that means. But with the border being closed, it means we're not there to take people's asylum cases, people who are, fleeing danger. We're simply not giving them the opportunity to seek asylum. Hence the people coming to the border dropping off. Whereas when it was open, people were able to make appointments. Did it not?
Was there? Okay.
Oh. So I just want to make that distinction because I think when people hear open border, they think it's like an open door and people just walk through with no questions asked, but do I have that right, Bill?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it just means we were taking appointments to hear people's asylum cases.
Yeah, so that's what happened here in December 2020. December of 20, would have been September of 23, but there was the Biden administration started enacting policies by executive order to restrict the number of people that could come in every day. And that's kind of a long, I don't know if we really want to have that discussion tonight, but we can talk about, if we have questions, if you guys are interested later, we can talk a little bit more about what happened with immigration during the Biden administration. Because that is, I think we are here now because of the backlash against what happened during the Biden administration. I think there was, after the election in last year, I think a poll said that 70% of Americans wanted a change in immigration. So it was a fairly bipartisan issue that people were unhappy with conditions surrounding immigration. And that question isn't very specific. I think you could say, I think objectively I would agree, like immigration was messy. I don't think we're doing a good job with our immigration policy under the Biden administration. I don't think we're doing a good job now. So that question is misleading to say that 70% of people were unhappy. It doesn't necessarily, you're not explaining what part of the immigration process they have a problem with when you say that.
Yeah, and just to say it, you'll never I can't speak for Bill, but you'll never catch me saying any political party has it right. I think this is a issue that doesn't have a lot of political capital unless it's used in a fear-based way, and so the problem just hasn't been addressed. And there are certain presidents who earned certain titles they were given for their immigration policies, and it's just been a mess across the board.
So the last bucket is deportations and interior enforcement. And this is probably the area where the changes in government practice have been so public. The main immigration change has been they've been much more aggressive and more indiscriminate detentions. There's been a lot of downward pressure from the White House to arrest 3,000 people a day. That's been their explicit goal. So as a result, ICE is more focused on the number of people they are arresting rather than whether or not they're criminals. There's now a backlog of 4 million pending removal cases. Judges have been ordered to increase the number of expedited removals. And just for a sense of scale, I know these are a lot of numbers. Like Maggie keeps saying, these are people. Another number just to kind of understand, we have 600 immigration judges in the U.S. That's why we started. 83 have been fired so far this year. And so it's created a huge bottleneck where there's a lot of people who are waiting to have their cases or, to have those credible fear interviews, to do their check-ins for their asylum claim. There's multiple points along that process where you have to check in with a judge. And now these judges are really overworked to get that done. So the way that the judges have been ordered to increase the number of expedited removals is that instead of it being people who are within 100 miles of the border zone, now it's anywhere in the U.S. And that used to be within 2 weeks of arrival to the country. Now it's if you've been in the country for 2 years, less than 2 years. So they dramatically expanded the people who are eligible for expedited removals. And again, all those asylee claimants and temporary parole people those 1 million people who lost their legal status are now eligible for removal. So what's been happening is a person may be ordered to be removed at their hearing or asylum check-in, and ICE agents have been waiting for them outside the courtroom. A judge recently ruled against this in Chicago, but again, that's going through the appeal process. The other thing that's been happening that's getting a lot of attention in the news is the nationalization of the federal National Guard, or federalization of the National Guard, I should say. So the National Guard troops have been federalized and sent to LA, Portland, and Chicago against the wishes of their governors. DC, they've also been federalized in DC, but DC doesn't have the authority to refuse them. So when this happens, the National Guard is supposed to only come to protect federal agents. They're not allowed to participate in law enforcement. The President has been talking about invoking the Insurrection Act, which would have authorized the National Guard and other military branches to engage in law enforcement. This is only supposed to be invoked when there's a rebellion that local law enforcement cannot handle. So the National Guard has been federalized 30 times in our country's history, but only once against the wishes of the governor, and that was in 1963 to enforce school segregation. So you see that it's controversial to federalize and send in federal troops against the wishes of the governor. It's very different to do that without their wishes. ICE has been ramping up detentions, and there's been numerous accounts of U.S. citizens being held for days. ProPublica reported at least 170 U.S. citizens have been detained this year. We started with 40,000 beds for detention capacity in January. Now we're up to 59,000 people are in detention, 79% of which do not have a criminal conviction. And this information comes from a Freedom of Information Act from the federal government. So this is the federal government's own data on this.
Can I add a little something to that?
Yeah.
5 weeks ago at North Lake Detention Center, there was 600 people detained. And as of today, that count is, what was it, 1,547 was the count this morning.
So this is the detention center in Grayling?
In Baldwin.
Or Baldwin, okay, yeah.
Great Lakes had 600 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Almost 1,600 this morning, that count.
So 16 went from 600 to 1,600 people in detention, yeah. And that is a private facility. 90% of detainees are in private facilities. So this is like Geo Group. These are professional prison corporations that have been getting contracts from the government to detain these people. An additional 181,000 people are in ICE's alternative to detention program, meaning that they're wearing GPS tracking devices, which are also supplied by private companies. There was a question that was submitted ahead of time just about what is happening with ICE in Ottawa County. There's been reports that they've conducted raids at Miller Knoll and Yangfang looking for to arrest workers there. There's also been reports that they've been arresting people they encounter on the street. So not nearly as the level of what's happening in Chicago, but they are active in Ottawa County. So far this year, 8,100 people have been deported to what's called a third country, meaning a country they're not from and where they may not even speak the language. There's been many reports of this happening to people under duress or under false pretenses or in secret. And just to be clear, the UN Convention Against Torture prohibits sending people to a country that may be unsafe. So like the Sudan, there are people sent to the South Sudan, which is in the middle of a civil war, sent to a prison in El Salvador, where they've been reported torture and other inhumane treatment there as well. Under the same bucket, the One Big Beautiful Bill allocates $170 billion to immigration enforcement, giving it a larger budget than any military in the world except the U.S. and China. This includes 10,000 funding for 10,000 more ICE agents. It also increases the fees associated with the immigration process, so just raising another barrier and hindrance to achieving that status of green card, which is what everyone here is working towards. The fee, for example, the fee to an appeal and an immigration court decision has increased from $100 to $900. So next I just want to talk about it's called a Know Your Rights talk. A lot of these slides I got from Lighthouse Immigration Advocates, which is an amazing immigration law firm here in Holland. And they've done some Know Your Rights training. Really what this is about is just understanding what our rights all of us have as an American. Specifically the 4th and 14th Amendments. I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between police versus ICE. And I'm going to use ICE and CBP kind of interchangeably. There's a lot of overlap between what those agencies do. Talk about different kinds of warrants and then some civil rights basics. So just wanted to stress that knowing your rights or knowing our rights as an American is not a partisan issue. These amendments were developed in order to prevent government overreach, which I think is a nonpartisan issue. Not all of us want the government to be acting within their scope of what we want them to be doing. And along the same lines, just to make clear that I'm not a lawyer, I can give legal information, but not legal advice. And so, as I go through the talk, I'm going to just report what legal information. So civil law deals with breaches in contracts or disputes between people and organizations. The goal of civil law is to compensate the victim. In the case of immigration, the federal government is the victim. So think of like cheating on your taxes is a breaking of civil law. Criminal law deals with crimes and the goal is punishment. Entering the U.S. is a violation of civil law, not criminal law. So this is why, and that's why ICE and CBP handle deportations, not the Department of Justice. This is an administrative agent dealing with violations of civil law. So people who came here under parole, entered legally, and then when they lost their status and became unauthorized, they're breaking civil law. Of course, someone who entered the U.S. And then breaks a criminal law is also subject to criminal prosecution. So just to be clear, ICE agents are not police. They're administrative agents enforcing civil law, not criminal law. ICE is trained to lie to get what they want. They can misidentify themselves. They can say they have a warrant, or they can say they represent another agency. And I actually got that source from the ICE training manual. So what's been happening this year is because ICE is an administrative agency, they have less authority than criminal law enforcement, but they also have fewer restrictions on their detention process. So ICE this year has been trying to have it both ways. They may identify themselves as police for intimidation and then use more lax processes for detention. They've also been pushing the boundaries of vague legal language. We'll kind of talk about that more. So warrants. So what we think of as a warrant typically, historically, is what's called a judicial warrant. So this is signed by a judge for a specific person in crime based on evidence. And it gives the police the authority to enter private property. Administrative warrant is usually what ICE is carrying. It's signed by a fellow ICE officer, and is for someone suspected of unauthorized presence, and it does not give them authority to enter private property. So, and then I just wanted to show them kind of side by side just to see the differences. So you see an enforceable, legally binding judicial warrant signed by a judge, specific person and time, versus a non-binding warrant doesn't have those kind of details. And just to repeat, foundations are important. Everyone has constitutional rights. Right to due process, right to be free of unreasonable search and seizure, right to legal counsel, right to file civil suit, right to defend against deportation.
That's everybody,
Everyone.
everybody,
Mhm.
not status aside. I'll
Humans,
point that out.
humans.
Human beings, thank
Yeah.
you.
So,
And then just so you know, it's 4th of July,
mhm.
so we'll keep going.
Yeah, we're gonna keep rolling. I think, what was our goal? Was it an
I
hour?
don't know that we set a goal, but if you had in your mind 5, we won't go that far past it. Don't stress.
Yeah. The reason why knowing your rights is important is it prevents unnecessary arrests and unreasonable search and seizure. We want to hold the government accountable for violation of rights. It's important, and by talking about our rights, it informs people and helps them navigate and anticipate risks. And we want to empower people to advocate for themselves. So the Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable search and seizure. ICE and CBP, again, are 2 agents under the DHS that arrest people. And the same Fourth Amendment rights apply whether it's ICE or the police. The Fourth Amendment guarantees protections where someone has what the term is reasonable expectation of privacy, meaning how much protection varies based on circumstances or where you physically are when you encounter the administrative agent. So the 14th Amendment is also another important amendment that involves immigration. You notice the language, I wanted to highlight the language here, because in the first half they refer to the rights of citizens, and in the second half they refer to the rights of people. So I'm just going to read this part. The state shall not deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, or deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So they're very intentional to say, these are not rights that only apply to citizens, it applies to anyone regardless of immigration status. So I kind of alluded to this earlier, but just to give a sense, the border zone is this 100-mile border surrounding the country. Nearly 2 out of 3 people in the country live within this 100-mile border zone. And within the border zone, ICE has fewer restrictions or more authority. They're able to set up checkpoints, and there's a lower threshold of probable cause when they conduct action in this area. So, $1 million question, are ICE's actions legal? ICE is legally allowed to detain someone that they reasonably suspect is here unlawfully. The Supreme Court ruled on the shadow docket this summer that the definition of reasonable suspicion now includes speaking Spanish, you can have reasonable suspicion based on race, and being in certain areas like car washes or Home Depot parking lots. The Supreme Court also said they're allowed to detain them for a, quote, brief period of time. But as we said, there's been reports of U.S. citizens and other people being detained for days without being officially arrested. So not being read their Miranda rights, not being allowed phone call, not some of those other rights. There's another gray area where ICE operating as an administrative agent is not subject to the same requirements that we do of law enforcement. They are allowed to arrest someone with with probable cause. So it's a misnomer, or that's not typed properly.
Or a double negative.
They are not allowed without probable cause. So they are allowed to arrest someone with probable cause, which is a higher standard than reasonable suspicion. So just some examples that can trigger reasonable suspicion: giving fraudulent documents, lying to an agent, running from an agent is considered all reasons for probable cause. But as I was saying earlier, there's been examples of ICE agents. They rented a box truck and they went to a Home Depot parking lot and jumped out of the back of the box truck and fanned out. When you see people jumping out of an unmarked vehicle, not wearing clear indication of where they're from, they start running after people. It's reasonable to why someone would run away from them. So in some ways they're triggering probable cause just in the way that they're conducting themselves. ICE agents are legally required to identify themselves, and the law says when it's practical and safe. However, it's not been defined what is an emergency that would prevent them from identifying themselves. If you've been watching videos, you see oftentimes people are asking them their name and their badge number, and they respond, "I don't have to tell you," which is technically not true. You do have to you have to say it, but they've got, like I said, been getting a lot of backing from the DHS to in how they're conducting themselves. ICE is authorized to forcibly enter a car if it's an emergency. But they're supposed to use what's considered minimum amount of force necessary or what is objectively reasonable. Just for a sense of scale, ICE so far this year has forcibly removed at least 50 people from their cars, and that happened 8 times in the previous decade. So another area where it's been a significant ramp up in aggressive tactics. And there is no law requiring ICE agents or CBP agents to show their face. And for a note along that, what DHS has said is that the ICE agents cover their face out of fear of doxing or for their safety. DHS has recently made a claim that there's been a 1,000% increase in assaults and 8,000% increase in death threats. The only data they've shown to substantiate that is that there were 79 assaults on ICE agents in the first 6 months of this year. Versus 10 over the same period last year. So that is technically a 400% increase in encounters, but not what we would consider a significant difference. So there's numerous accounts of people being detained or even deported without due process. ICE is threatened to prosecute anyone who records them for harassment, which is First Amendment protection to record. And there's been numerous reports of ICE breaking into private areas without a judicial warrant. And there's reports of ICE also stopping people on the street using facial recognition software without consent to determine immigration status, which is, of course, not been established as a reasonable, this is a new use of this technology that's not been established by the courts as a reasonable law. So just some civil rights basics. You don't have to consent to a search. Should never present fake documents that triggers probable cause for arrest. It's your right to ask for a warrant. You have a right to remain silent. You have a right to record, and you have a reasonable expectation of privacy, which I kind of alluded to earlier. So if you're in your home, you have a full reasonable expectation of privacy versus if you encounter ICE agents on the street, it's very different. You don't have expectation of privacy at the same level.
And this is why we're seeing a lot of our neighbors hesitant to leave their homes, to grocery shop, to go to church, to participate in the community. So again, to bring us back to the people part of it, you have the most expectation of privacy in your home. So a lot of people are staying there.
So if you're in your home and ICE arrives, you don't have to open the door. It's your right to ask for a warrant. They can slide it under the door or hold it up to the windows. They're required to provide warrants and identify themselves. You should ask to see a badge. You should say, if you don't want them to enter, you should say, "You do not have my permission to enter." And should say that even after there are reports. And this has been happening, it's not new this year that ICE would forcibly enter houses, but it's happening on a scale that's much larger than before. You do not have to consent to a search. You should ask to speak with your attorney, and you don't have to say anything else. You have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Workplace encounters with ICE are different because there is public and private spaces in a workplace. To conduct a search of a workplace, an agent must have a warrant issued by a judge or permission to enter from the employer. An employer has a right to refuse to consent. And so LIA recommends clearly marking public and private spaces. ICE can enter public spaces without a warrant, but not private spaces. And again, same rules: remain silent. You can refuse a search. You should record, and don't present fake documents.
And I think the tricky thing that's happening in workplaces is they're sometimes going with the judicial warrant, but while they're there, they're just, feels wrong to say scooping up when we're talking about people, but they really are taking more than what they walked in the door legally to get, right?
Yeah, so that's so this is the difference between the police and ICE, another difference between them. So there's it's actually a slide coming up. I'll talk about that.
Oh, perfect.
So we're in public, ICE CBP can approach anyone on the street and ask questions. You should ask, am I free to go, if you don't want to talk with them or interact with them. If they say you're free to go, walk away slowly. If they say no, you should ask for an attorney and say no more. Don't run, don't resist arrest, don't lie or present fake documents. I just wanted to also just set aside, also address places of worship. Places of worship are largely open to the public. This is another kind of public-private space. There are usually some private spaces where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy. Without a judicial warrant, ICE again is only able to access public spaces. LAA recommends that churches create a protocol for who has authority to consent to enter private areas, and create a protocol for asking ICE to leave and communicating that with the congregants. So another thing that's changed this year is this definition, or there are surrounding these areas that are called sensitive locations. So schools, hospitals, medical facilities, places of worship, shelters. Historically, those were areas where ICBP were ordered not to conduct actions. Because what had been happening was people were, out of fear of being detained or deported, were not going to these facilities. And so people were delaying medical treatment. There were reports of spouses who were being abused, who were afraid to go to shelter, or afraid to leave their abusive spouse because of this. And that's been revoked. So now this year the ICE is no longer recognizing sensitive locations as a place where they won't conduct actions. And so what we've seen, and Maggie kind of alluded to this, is more and more reports of people avoiding to get services out of fear of deportation. I was talking with someone recently who's connected with the migrant community, and he's repeatedly seen people who are sick and feeling terrible, and they're afraid to go to the hospital because of the fact that they're worried about encountering ICE. And like I said earlier, there's been numerous reports of people who are U.S. citizens even being detained. So I know people who are U.S. citizens, but they're Hispanic, and they know that just by nature of being Hispanic, that puts them on ICE's radar for reasonable suspicion to be detained. And so even people who are U.S. citizens, who you think shouldn't have to fear being encountered or in an encounter with ICE, are nervous about those situations because of the way ICE has been conducting themselves this year.
And there are some pastors, at least that I've seen out of Chicago, whose churches are fairly empty on Sundays, and they're actually doing home visits instead because people are too afraid to go worship.
So what to do if ICE violates someone's rights? It can be helpful in an immigration case or a civil lawsuit. The remedy is to file a civil lawsuit against the federal government. And it helps if there's a record of the violation, for evidence in the case. This is what Maggie was talking about. It's called the exclusionary rule. So if police come in with a judicial warrant and they have evidence of a crime, but they find evidence of a different crime in the house, they're not allowed to use that evidence. Meaning, someone was accused of robbery and they find cocaine in the house, they can't be charged with cocaine possession, only the robbery. ICE is not subject to that rule. So if they come in with a judicial warrant to arrest someone, they're allowed to check everyone's immigration status in that house and arrest them as well. These are called collateral arrests. And in fact, early on, most of the arrests were collateral arrests. That's also in the process of litigation currently of whether or not that's going to be continue to be allowed or to be legal. LAA, just when they were doing Know Your Rights training, just wanted to stress with enough repeated violations that may result in a court telling ICE or CBP that they cannot engage in that behavior anymore. And that's what we're seeing now in Chicago, is that more and more they're being required to wear body cameras. There are stricter rules about when they're allowed to deploy tear gas, and they're having more oversight about how they're conducting themselves. So although there's a political and social cost in raising awareness, there's a risk of being detained by encountering ICE. There also empowers others to stand up.
Okay, let's skip to any questions. Bill covered a lot of information, which is good. Thank you, Bill. Any questions? Feel free to, oh,
I have a question. What about children and children being detained by ICE? Is that legal or?
So, a lot of the U.S. citizens that have been deported were children of people who are here unauthorized, and there's been reports from the parents that they were being told, just go with your parents now, and then we'll bring you back, and they're not being brought back. So it's not entirely clear. There's been conflicting stories between what the parents are saying, how the children are being deported, or what, under what circumstances. Because there's also been issues with, okay, if the parents get deported, where do those kids go? So that's been another kind of problem where the parents are saying, I don't want my kids to be deported with me, I do want them with me. So it's been kind of all over the map for what happens with those kids. There's actually Bethany Christian Services has a program that has for children of refugees or for those kids who are unaccompanied if their parents are being deported. Yeah.
I have my assumptions on this, but what has been communicated, what are the differences that has been communicated on immigration policies between the Biden administration and the Trump administration? Again, I have my assumptions, but what has been communicated?
You mean from the media, you mean, or?
No, from their own, platforms.
Their position?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, why are we seeing these large differences from the Biden administration to the Trump administration on how they are handling immigration?
Yeah, in fact, I mean, even Trump 1.0 versus Trump 2.0 is very different, right? I think I'm just going to give my opinion. So a lot of what I've given so far is facts, well supported with citations. But my opinion on this is that, so we talked about that 70% of people polled said there's a problem with immigration. The Trump administration, DHS, has frequently said we have a mandate to do this. This is what the people want. Polls have not reflected that. There's been a lot of polling lately that there's actually been increased support for a pathway to citizenship. There's been polling has shown that more and more people are saying they do not approve of how things are being conducted. But I think the difference between Trump 1.0 versus 2.0 is who's conducting all these things. I think there are people in his administration who more support a more aggressive deportation policy, and he's kind of given them more authority to conduct that. What do you think?
oh, me, I thought you were asking Pastor Ben. I'm waiting for Pastor. Again, my opinion, which is uncomfortable for me because we made a vow to provide information, but I do think nobody has actually addressed the problem and put legislation in place that fixes the problems of today. I appreciate that the Biden administration didn't close the door to people trying to seek safety, but one could argue it overloaded the system a little bit without actually addressing the problem. But again, addressing the problem isn't always politically, it doesn't get you a lot of points. It's the right thing to do, but politicians don't typically operate that way. And so I think that's the biggest issue is Biden looked really friendly for people trying to seek safety, and so they came. And there were laws in place, so they came legally, but the system is overloaded. I don't personally think the answer is to shut the door and kick everyone out who came legally. But I think it's the perception too, part of it.
Yeah.
But I think everybody's really eager for solutions, and I think the polling shows that. I just think people are confused in their different camps. I think we all agree that we need pathways to citizenship. that don't exist?
We were close in 2011, I think it was. It was called the Gang of Eight. It was a bipartisan group. They developed a process. It was a 10-year-long process to a path to citizenship, and it included fees and, of course, like obeying the laws and a heavy vetting process. It was to address all these people who have crossed the border outside of ports of entry or undocumented. What we usually think of undocumented, someone who snuck across the border or swam across the river and is here within the U.S., maybe has a fake social security number, but literally outside of the system. You know, a lot of those people are being paid underneath the table. That's, you know, most like migrant workers who are not being paid a living wage. That's who we think of as undocumented. And so there's a huge political cost to bringing them out of the shadows and getting them into the system that I don't think either parties really were interested in doing that work. That was the reason why President Obama deported so many people. Is there was a complaint? They said, no, this is what's the word? Not asylum, but this is anyways, that this would be forgiving the people for what they had done. So amnesty, thank you. So he aggressively deported as a lot of people who are here unauthorized, to say like, okay, we're going to level set, we're going to deport a lot of people who are here unauthorized, and then we can start working this process of path to citizenship. And then the talks broke down and it never made it out of committee, and that was the closest we ever came to a path to citizenship process, which is over, like I said, like over 15 years ago. So in my mind, I think that the solution for immigration in America is we need secure borders, of course. We need to talk about like who's coming across or who's entering, but also acknowledge the fact that people are coming here because of civil unrest and conflict and issues in their home country. So we should be, in my opinion, some of that is due to our intervention in those countries. We've put in place people like Juan Orlando, who's the former president of Honduras, because he, you know, followed our orders, and so he was compliant with the federal government. And so we're happy to have him in place. There are things that happen in Haiti, like where we flooded the market with rice and basically bottomed out their farming economy, because and so. In ways that we've tried to help, or we acted on our own interests in these countries, we've set up countries that are struggling economically, and as a result, now there's a population that is seeking opportunity in other places. So like we said, immigration is very complicated. There's a lot of issues. There's not going to be one single solution that fixes the problems. But I think that not allowing anyone to cross the border at all doesn't address why people were crossing the border in the first place, doesn't address people who are here not making a living wage, living in the shadows. So although there's multi-pronged solution, I think, to all that.
And I think it has to be said that our broken immigration system just allows for a lot of exploitation of people. And when I'm consuming current events, I'm always trying to shake off some of the things that we're kind of conditioned to think about, like, well, should my taxpayer dollars go towards there, whatever? And those are sometimes really valid questions, especially if we're Christians who are called to really participate in the politics of it. But I try to consume all these current events and remember the human element of it, and always seeking human flourishing and recognizing that these systems allow for exploitation. At least that's kind of the posture I always try to approach things with. And I think that if more of us can adopt that way, we can maybe find solutions that actually serve mankind. One of you.
So with that said, my thing is, or my question is, what is the biggest concern in this group? The community in Holland?
For our task force. So we've been trying to figure that out. and I kind of glossed over some parts of the who we are on the task force earlier, so I'm glad you're asking this question. We're finding that in our group, there are people kind of fitting different buckets. Rachel, can I call you out? Rachel is very active in like the advocacy, rapid response to ICE, is that what it's called? I'm a little bit more of the like, let's all do a Bible study together. Like I'm a little bit more of that, like, let's come together and hold hands person in the group. Bill never lets us miss a current event. So I think we care on all levels. So if you want to get plugged into our group and you have a specific niche that you feel called to, I did put a sign-in sheet and then I put a question if you want to get involved. And I'm so glad you asked this question because I wanted to provide a little context. If you circled yes for email, we'll just keep you updated on if we do more of these, if we offer prayer sessions, anything like that. And then there's a question about our WhatsApp thread. That's where we're on there every day. Like, who's gonna drive so-and-so to the dentist? She has a dentist appointment today. Really like in it with our immigrant neighbors. If you wanna do that kind of thing, circle yes, and then I'll probably call you or maybe Bill will call you. The WhatsApp thread can be a lot for people who just wanna like do this kind of stuff or maybe come to the Bible study. So talk to us and we'll figure out where you maybe wanna get involved.
One last question. I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. Do you have?
Was there an official statement? So, understanding your presentation, there's many immigrants that came here following the process, whether it was showing up at the border, seeking asylum, whatever, and came in and were here documented, legally authorized, all the things. What was the reasoning for revoking up? Was there ever a statement as to why these were blanket revoked? So the people that did all the work, were vetted, and were here doing all the things right, and still had their status taken away.
No. So there's a couple different scenarios. So people who came here under humanitarian parole, that was always a temporary program. There were people who were here for years. So like a huge group came from Haiti after the earthquake, which was in 2010 or something like that. And they just kept getting it because Haiti still isn't a good place to return to. They kept getting that temporary status extended, but there wasn't a lot of protection for that group. Within a year, if you were within a year of arriving under humanitarian parole, you're expected to apply for asylum. And I think a lot of people, because it's costly and it's an arduous process, and it means like finding an immigration lawyer who there may not be one nearby. A lot of people who were here just continued living here and had a work visa or were here under humanitarian parole, but they did not have a lot of rights or protection. And so, no, there has been an official statement of why those people lost their humanitarian parole. It was just decided that they need to leave. CHNV, Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela was one of the largest programs. I think there were 400,000 people here underneath that program. That was one of the biggest programs where it was just announced, we're no longer going to renew this humanitarian parole. Which is perfectly legal to do because it was always supposed to be a temporary program. It was supposed to be a pathway to claiming asylum. And then once you're in the asylum process, you have more protections, more rights. It's a higher threshold to meet to be deported. But that's also happening. So that's a different bucket, that there are people who are in that asylum process. Maybe they've already had their credible fear interview or they're waiting for their credible fear interview. And judges, there's a lot of pressure now. Passing that asylum process, my understanding, talking to immigration lawyers, is very arduous. You need to provide hard evidence that you have a credible fear of persecution based on those criteria: sexual orientation, gender, politics. And so if you can't demonstrate that, you don't get asylum status. So it is a rigorous process. It's always been a rigorous process. And there's, like I said, there's a lot of downward pressure on the judges to be revoking those credible fear interviews and those other processes. I mean, I think there are some parallels to like the criminal process. you have a 16-year-old who gets a drunk driving or a DUI, and they come in front of the judge, and the judge makes a character assessment and says, like, I think you're a good kid. I think this is one off. I think you're going to be okay. More and more, the executive branch is pressuring the judges just to say no to everybody, to be more strict, to be harder, and to give less second chances.
I also think, I'm gonna be bold and say, I think there's always been a little bit of an undercurrent of racism, and the quiet part was said out loud when the vice president said Americans don't want neighbors that speak a different language.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that much too, for why there's a motivation to kick people out.
Pastor Jonathan, you had a question as well?
Maybe a question for is it Rachel?
Yeah.
Rapid response, did anybody say anything about the meeting next Tuesday?
No, so give Rachel a chance to kind of describe what rapid response is. There's a meeting next Tuesday, I believe, at Maple Ave, right?
No, this is at First Congregational.
In Saugatuck.
Oh, okay. Yeah, do you want to
Sure.
talk a little bit about what rapid response
Yeah.
is? And
So there's several rapid response groups. It's an organization that's nationwide. There's groups out of Chicago, Grand Rapids, Muskegon County, and a new group has been started down covering Ottawa, Allegan, and Van Buren County called Todos Bienvenidos Rapid Response to ICE. It is just an organization of people that don't want to see people hauled off. There's two branches to it, so the people that want to be in the mix with it, there's an active response group. We have encrypted communication methods we use. When ICE is reported, they can, anybody can call our hotline and say, ICE is at my door, I just saw them at a gas station, whatever. We deploy people to verify. Once it's verified, as many people as can show up and just try to document how they're doing it, video, live stream. We're publicizing all of the things they're trying to do in the dark, essentially. Because, funny thing, when they're being live streamed and videotaped, they tend to tuck their tails and run. And if they're going to do that, we're going to keep doing it. There's a whole mutual aid side, which requires many more people and volunteers, that when somebody is detained, we then reach out to the family and say, if you don't feel safe at home tonight, we can give you, we can provide temporary sanctuary housing. ICE historically and almost exclusively lately has been going only after breadwinners. And they're picking them up on their way to work at gas stations, at coffee shops, wherever they can, because they want to force people to leave because they can't support their families. So they're going after breadwinners. So we have an entire mutual aid wing, and all of the groups do, all the rapid response groups do, that then offer, do you need help paying rent next month? Let's get that off your plate. Do you need help finding a lawyer? Do you need help with retainer fees, groceries, diapers? The biggest one lately has been like diapers and wipes and formula, like just helping these families survive while they're trying to figure out where their loved one's been taken and what they can do.
So my understanding is that the Tuesday meeting is training.
So Tuesday is, officially it's a retraining.
Yes.
We did a training a little while back. We felt a lot was missed. We're now doing our own training, so it's not even a full training. So let me say that. I recommend, if you haven't been to a training, this not be your first one. It's essentially a retraining for the people that went to the training we held before to cover some areas we feel were missed. And then going forward, the hope is to have trainings, hopefully monthly, between Lakeshore Rapid Response and Total Bienvenidos Rapid Response, that will provide you minimum training, because again, every situation is different, on if you want to be an active responder, what you might face and how you should behave, and if you want to participate in mutual aid, the different things that we try to offer there.
So you would not recommend it?
Not Tuesdays, but there will be many more coming up, and like I said, both Lakeshore Rapid Response and Total Bienvenidos. The Total Bienvenidos Rapid Response is officially launching after Tuesday. So then you'll be able to find more information on them. But Lakeshore has ramped up their trainings and the other group will as well. And Grand Rapids is always a good group. They've been around since 2017, so they've been doing it a while.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know we went long, but I think it was a good discussion, so appreciate that. We're gonna close with benediction.
Yeah, but real quick, just in case you're interested in coming next Sunday, we're gonna go over a bunch of myths, just top myths about immigration, and we'll talk about what the truth is there, a Q&A. So if you did write any questions down, we can make sure we get those answered. And then we kind of went back and forth. We feel bad about giving, in our opinion, bad news and then just saying, have a good night, bye. Next week, we'll talk about next steps, how you can get involved, and kind of, I'd love to help people explore maybe where God's calling you to get plugged in around this topic. I think we need more of us to really approach it with courage and truth and conviction and love. Okay, on that note, if you guys don't mind reading something along with me, I thought we could end this way. Okay. God, lover of all people, creator of all nations, we praise you for all that you have made. Thank you for the rich mosaic that is the body of Christ. Thank you for difference amidst unity, for unity amidst difference. Give us the spirit of understanding and appreciation of each other. Help us to see your image clearly in those around us. Bless us now, and may we declare your praises with our whole lives. Through your risen Lord Jesus. Amen. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
for coming out.
Thanks everybody for coming tonight. This is part 2 of our immigration talk. Last week we covered a little bit about our faith, about Christian response and what's been going on in the world. We'll talk about that in a minute. But just to introduce ourselves again, my name is Bill Swears. My wife and I have been going to Boulevard now for a couple of years. And we were part of a team that's been kind of responding to needs around surrounding immigration in the area since about January. And that's taken a lot of different forms, but part of that was, as we started these conversations, we felt like there was just a need to even just raise awareness about what's happening. And so that's how these talks kind of formed. We did it back in March. Lots happened since then, so we felt like it was a good time to kind of do it again.
And I'm Maggie Skierbeck. I've been attending Boulevard with my husband Josh for I think almost 4 years maybe. And we have 3 kids, 1, 4, and 6 that obviously also come here. And I thought I would just share, I remember we did this back in March and I forgot to last Sunday, but just kind of like why, not that I'm qualified to be a voice on immigration, but just kind of like how I got into this spot. When we pulled out of Afghanistan in 2020 and just witnessing that, something kind of blossomed in me. And I started to do some kind of advocacy work during the pandemic, joining Zoom calls, talking with Congress people on Zoom, and then that got me involved with some other groups. And then here I am today. So I just took an interest in it. I'm actually an interior designer by schooling, but I just care a lot about our immigrant neighbors and communities. So that's why I'm here.
So I'm going to open us up with prayer. God, we're so thankful that you safely gathered us all here today. Thank you for giving each person here a heart for the vulnerable and a curious mind to ask questions about what is happening to our neighbors. We know that we don't have all the answers, and we know that we can't solve all the problems of the world. But we ask you for continued strength and guidance along the way, that we may continue to follow your teachings, have compassion and care for those around us in need. We pray that we're never distracted from the fact that you sent your one and only Son to earth, not as a powerful king, but as a baby born humbly and who went on to experience the human pain and suffering that we do, and even experiencing being a refugee and an immigrant himself as he and his family fled the violence of Herod. And that he died for our sins at the hands of humans pursuing power and tribalism, and in his death and resurrection, he conquered and overcame the world. We know that you have given us freedom in this, and also responsibility to seek your purpose fulfilled on this earth as it is in heaven. We are thankful that you are with us as we fumble through the messiness of this world. God, we need you. Help us to keep our eyes on you. Help us to channel our discontent and anger to loving action. Help us to practice discernment and wisdom as we consume the news and process current events. Help us to remember that our allegiance is to you. We also ask that you please, God, protect our immigrant neighbors near and far. Be with them, comfort them, help them to have the ultimate peace only possible through you. We ask all of this and trust it to you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay, so I see some repeat faces. Was anyone not at last Sunday? Okay, so some of you guys. So we're gonna just do a quick reminder of what we covered. We did record it, and we'll be sending that out. So if you want to receive that, make sure you sign in on these white sign-in sheets, and we'll make sure you get that recording. And then obviously we're always reachable if you have questions or anything. But we'll just do a quick run through of what we covered. And then, did you say what we're talking about yet?
No.
Okay. So today, we're going to cover some common immigration myths. As we reviewed it, so this was a presentation that, like Bill said, we did back in March. And I feel like the myths about immigration have almost quadrupled since March. So we're sticking with the myths that we outlined in March, but we just want to recognize it's the tip of the iceberg of some kind of lies that have been perpetuated about immigrants and immigration. So I just wanted to recognize that because I think, there's more to say about it, but we're going to cover a lot. And then if anyone has any thoughts or anything along the way, just flag us or raise your hand. Okay, so, I didn't even extend the slide. I've already failed. Okay. So last session we started out by just kind of diving into what does the Bible say about immigration, and how are we called to respond. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of that. We talked about the power of prayer, remembering to pray for our leaders and maybe if we like them or don't like them, just remembering to pray for anybody who has influence and leadership. And also to just pray for our communities. We know that this, our neighborhood here has been impacted by all of this as well. So praying for our neighborhood. We talked about how nonpartisan doesn't mean apolitical. So Bill and I, and just Boulevard in general, we put in a lot of effort to be nonpartisan, but that doesn't mean that we're apolitical. So a lot of things are political in nature, and Christians are called to, face that head on and not be afraid to talk about things that are political. A good reminder, we believe God calls us to a deep love for the vulnerable, the marginalized, and the forgotten. And we're also called to be peacemakers in every room we walk into. So just not kind of adding to the divided nature of being a person right now. And then our allegiance is to one true king. It's not to a TV channel, a political party, a government, but it is to Jesus. We're to love our neighbor. And then we also talked about the Bible says a lot about immigration, and we're actually going to do a Bible study in January. I believe it's January 16 is when the Bible studies are going to kick off. We don't know yet who's going to be facilitating it, but it is a 6 week study, and some of us from the task force went through it, and it's really well done. So if you're interested, more to come on that, and we'll dive into what the Bible says about it.
So then just kind of a recap as well from last week about kind of what's been happening this year. So if you didn't know, basically all entry into the U.S. has essentially dropped to zero. I just step back a second. So immigration in the country is very complicated. There's a lot of different ways to enter and a lot of different ways to stay in the country. The new administration has made a lot of changes in the past 10 months and continues to press for more. But generally, broadly to describe it, there's been a huge increase in the number of people being detained and deported, and a dramatic drop in people coming into the country. And with that increase in detention and deportation has been less of a focus on quote unquote, the criminals or the worst of the worst, and it's been much more about focusing on numbers, arresting as many people as possible. The courts have been pushing back on some of these policies, but they're often slow to react, and so you see a policy being enacted, and it may be months before a court determines whether or not it's legal. And some other numbers to kind of be aware of. 79% of people in detention currently have no criminal record. The One Big Beautiful Bill dedicated $170 billion to Department of Homeland Security. Refugee admissions have dropped from 125,000 a year, and starting in this past October, now the goal will be 7,500 a year, so a huge drop. There were almost 1 million people who were here on parole status, which is like a temporary status, and that was revoked. And so there's now 1 million people who were here, came legally, and now are eligible for deportation. And then just to be clear, unauthorized entry into the U.S. is not breaking criminal law; it's breaking civil law. Everyone in the U.S. has rights regardless of immigration status. And then last week I went into more detail, but talking about different amendments that have been violated. So Fourth Amendment right to unreasonable search and seizure has been dragging people out of their car, breaking down doors to enter private residence. They've been violating the 14th Amendment right to due process by detaining people without arrests or reading them Miranda rights or giving them a phone call. And then also a lot of these detention centers have pretty terrible conditions. And then First Amendment right to peaceful protest and also record. There's been reports of ICE threatening to arrest people or detain people just for simply recording. And then last week you also talked a little bit about kind of a know your rights, what to do if you encounter ICBP. So you do not have to consent to a search. You do not have to speak to them or answer any questions. You should never present false documents. You should not run away from them. And it's always good to record because there is a possibility of violation of civil rights and that could be litigation down the road as a result of that. And so recording any interactions can be entered as evidence in any sort of court proceedings.
So that is a recap of what we covered. So if any of that sounds interesting or if you have questions, look out for that recording. Today we're going to use this document from World Relief. I don't know if you guys are familiar. It's a global Christian organization whose mission is to boldly engage with the world's biggest crises. So I am a big fan of what they do. We wanted to use a really trusted resource, so we'll be using this Equipped to Act resource for these myths. So the first myth that we will talk about is that immigration is a drain on the economy. And the truth is that immigration actually has positive economic impacts. Refugees and other immigrants contribute by filling essential jobs, starting businesses, paying taxes. There's a lot of different studies that show refugees and asylees contributed almost 124 billion with a B to the economy over the last 15 years. Another study showed that the average refugee adult contributes over $20,000 in taxes than they actually draw from the system in benefits. And that actually will be even higher because, and we'll talk about some of the changes in the Big Beautiful Bill. I can never say that, Big Beautiful Bill, because that actually revoked refugees' access to certain benefits like Medicaid and SNAP. So they're still paying just as many taxes and drawing less benefit. I also, just for the sake of instilling some trust in what we're showing, I just wanted to give an example. On the last slide, we showed our sources or World Relief sources. I know back in March we had a lot of people who were like, show me your sources. So we wanted to make sure we showed this. Just some examples. That information came from the Brookings Institute, which is a nonprofit think tank in Washington, D.C. Also some information from the National Bureau of Economic Research, which is another private nonprofit organization, nonpartisan. It's a network of 1,800 affiliated economists, 47 past or present in that group have won the Nobel Prize in economic sciences. So really legitimate information. That also included a study by the US Department of Health and Human Services, which has since been scrubbed from federal websites, but using, I think it's called Page Freezer, I was able to go find the study that showed that 124 billion positive fiscal impact. But like I said, that has been removed from government websites by this administration. And then also a lot of information is pulled from the American Immigration Council as well.
So myth number 2, refugees and other immigrants increase crime rates. The truth is that refugees and other immigrants, including undocumented people or people who are here unauthorized, are less likely to commit crimes than native-born Americans. So there's not tons of data on this. The only state in the U.S. that tracks. Oh yeah.
We're talking about number 2.
Oh, they're out of order again.
Okay.
This really tripped me up last week Sunday. I was like, thank you.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's.
see, they,
Oh, there's myth number 3.
Uh-huh.
So.
no,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
I
no, I
can
appreciate
do
you
it.
telling me.
It's just gonna take more mental, I think it's this one, right? Yeah, will you guys just tell me if I'm off? Okay, I'm gonna do my best up here. It's so tiny. Okay,
We're making it work.
is it my turn now?
No.
Oh,
I'm still doing myth number 2. So myth number 2, yeah. So the only state in the U.S. that tracks immigration status of people when they're arrested is Texas. But Texas has a lot of data. So although they're the only state, they have a lot of data showing that migrants were 37% less likely to commit a crime than native-born Americans. Another study showed native-born Americans were 2 times more likely to commit violent crimes. Another study showed them 5 times more likely. These numbers, so the data doesn't support this claim that refugees increase crime rates. It's quite the opposite, especially when you factor in the fact that in any community, the number of unauthorized immigrants or refugees is so small that they're not even an appreciable part of the community to say that they're, some outsized influence on crime in that area.
okay. Myth number 3, refugees and other immigrants are taking jobs away from Americans. And the truth is that refugees and other immigrants take or fill jobs that Americans are typically unwilling to do. This is especially true in industries like agriculture, construction, and hospitality. The American Immigration Council reports that immigrants make up, so in these different industries, agriculture is 26%, construction 15%, hospitality 17%. And then there is one study, a lot of data comes out of Texas, we found in this presentation, that a 1% increase in employment in Texas, which was attributed to immigration, is associated with a 0.4 to 0.5% increase in income per worker in that state. So a small, but Americans are making more money, a positive effect on wages of native-born workers.
The one other data point I added in, the Labor Department put out a report last week, which got picked up about agriculture jobs. So I'm just going to read a quote from that report. They said, "The near total cessation of the inflow of illegal aliens is threatening the stability of domestic food production and prices for U.S. consumers. Unless the Labor Department acts immediately to provide a source of stable and lawful labor, this threat will grow." So there's already increasing in prices of groceries in the U.S. and the Labor Department, which from this administration to be able to admit that is pretty significant. That deporting unauthorized people from these farms is having an impact. We're seeing issues with the ability to produce our food as a result.
There was also a study by Texans for Economic Growth that shows there's a large number of Texans aged 55 and older that are expected to retire, about 7.1 million in the next decade. And so they're concerned about not having the necessary population growth. And that's a lot of people are saying that we're gonna need people to come here. There's gonna be a shortage of humans, and there are concerns that the United States is setting ourselves up to not be a desired place for people to come.
Myth number 4, seeking asylum at the border is illegal. So actually, and we talked about this last week, so I'm going to kind of go over this again from last week, but the only difference between coming here as a refugee and coming here and seeking asylum is where you physically are when you make that claim. So a refugee makes that claim from their home country, and then in order to seek asylum, you have to be physically present either in the country or at a port of entry in order to claim asylum. So people who are coming here and claiming asylum have to meet the same criteria. They have to have a credible claim of persecution due to race, religion, nationality, or political opinion. And that process for applying for asylum is very rigorous. There's interviews, and it takes years to do. And just for a sense of kind of scale, there's currently 3.4 million pending asylum claims. The average wait time is about 3.5 years. And after a year of being in asylum, after a year of getting your asylum status, becoming an asylee, you're able to apply for a green card.
Myth number 5, persecuted Christians are not part of the immigrants trying to come through the U.S. southern border. The truth is that there are persecuted Christians who are opting, rather than filing for refugee resettlement from their home country, they're opting to come to the southern border, kind of like what Bill said. So I included some information from Open Doors. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but they kind of track globally Christian persecution. And they, here's kind of a graph to show that we're kind of rebounding up in quantity of Christian refugees. It's a 447% increase. So in 2020, we had about 5,400 Christians coming here as refugees, and last year it was about just shy of 30,000. So, and I think you guys have maybe seen in the news, there's been more chatter about global Christian persecution. So I included this map. They call it their World Watch List. And the top 5 were North Korea, Somalia, Yemen, Libya, and Sudan. So I pulled together some numbers. 1 in 7 Christians are persecuted worldwide. That number really hit me. 1 in 5 Christians in Africa are persecuted, and 2 in 5 in Asia. So we know there are a lot of followers of Jesus who need help, and as you guys know, the refugee resettlement program, like Bill said, is down to 7,500 people, primarily Afrikaners from South Africa. So not these people. 380 million Christians around the world suffer high levels of persecution for their faith. About 4,500 were murdered last year for following Jesus. About 7,700 churches and church properties were attacked last year. And then about 210,000 Christians were forced to leave their homes and either go into hiding in their country or leave their country altogether.
Myth number 6. Most fentanyl in the U.S. is brought by immigrants who cross the U.S.-Mexico border illegally. The truth is that the majority of fentanyl that enters the U.S. comes through legal ports of entry, primarily through international mail or express consignment shipments. And actually a lot of it is mules. People physically, driving across the border with a truckload of fentanyl. And those are, because they're entering the port of entry and they don't want to get hassled at the border, it's usually U.S. citizens who are doing this, who are paid. I think so. 89% of convicted fentanyl traffickers were U.S. citizens. And 93% of fentanyl seized in fiscal year 23 was at legal crossing points or interior checkpoints. So I don't want to diminish just how serious the fentanyl crisis is. It had, 87,000 deaths last year from fentanyl. And just to give a sense of the scale, 21,000 pounds were seized last year at the southern border, 43 pounds at the northern border, which is just, I think good to keep in mind when we talk about where the threats of fentanyl are coming from, or we talk about where resources should be put to stop those kind of things. The southern border is the main area, and that has been going down this year. That is one bright spot kind of this year, is that fentanyl seized at the border is down 25%. There was I couldn't find a clear explanation of why that is exactly. It seems to be a combination of the president of Mexico being more aggressive about enforcement, and maybe seizing boats that were bringing the fentanyl precursors, so the chemicals that you use to make fentanyl come from China. So maybe seizing those boats. So it's kind of multifactorial, but that is one good thing that happened this year, is that the amount of fentanyl crossing the border has gone down significantly this year.
And I think that's such a good example of, as Christians, always making sure that we are seeing the truth, because it is a problem. But if we blame a scapegoat, or we are looking in the wrong direction, the problem won't be solved. And so I think that's such a clear example of, and just making sure we're not dehumanizing image bearers along the way, and seeing people as a problem to be solved when the problem is the fentanyl. And myth number 7, Christians don't want their pastors to preach on politics or immigration in church. Lifeway Research, they put out a number of 82% of evangelical Christians would value hearing a sermon on how biblical values can apply to the current immigration situation. I was surprised by that number. 70% believe Christians have a responsibility to care for refugees and foreigners. I find those numbers encouraging. Feels like there's a disconnect with just my perception, but I hope these numbers are true, and I hope they keep going up. And thank you for being here and wanting this kind of information from a church. Do you guys feel like those numbers are surprising? Yeah, I thought so too. But I do think leaning into that optimism and kind of thinking, that gives me the confidence to enter in these conversations with people who I would probably perceive as resistant. And I do enter into conversation with people I perceive as resistant, and I just keep chugging along. But I think this is good and hopeful.
Myth number 8, allowing immigrants into the country threatens national security. Most immigrants come to the U.S. to seek refuge from violence, persecution, or poverty in their home countries. Properly managed immigration processes can enhance national security by facilitating the screening of individuals entering the country. We kind of talked about this a little bit already. The process for admitting refugees is a very rigorous process. It's 2 years on average of vetting and interviews. The asylum process, again, is very similar. It's just the difference is that it's happening while people are here. And while they're here, and then in that asylum process, there's check-ins, there's requirements that along the way. So they're in the system, so to speak, and still, they're still, if at any time in the asylum process if a person commits a crime, that's out there, immediately deported. So there are other barriers in place that protect national security around that process as well. And just to even that asylum process starts with what's called a credible fear interview. So someone claims asylum, pretty soon after that, they come in for an interview called a credible fear, meaning, is your claim seem realistic that if you went back to your home country, you would be persecuted? And then the process of the hearing to get asylee status is in front of a judge with the lawyers presenting evidence, almost like a trial. So it's a very This is not just like, like a trust me bro kind of thing. It's like you have to provide evidence that this is a concern.
Next myth is that unauthorized migrants get government benefits like SNAP, Medicaid, and free housing. The truth of it is unauthorized migrants don't have the ability to access any government assistance programs. We have a chart that's really helpful that I'll pull up. I do want to note, though, that refugees and asylees who have been vetted and have legal status used to have access to SNAP, Medicaid, and housing assistance. But like I mentioned, the big, beautiful bill removed that. So we'll send these slides out, but this is so helpful. It's from USA Facts. If you have an Instagram, follow USA Facts on Instagram. They put really helpful information, especially part of the hurdle, I think, in talking with people about something like immigration is things get heated and there's a lot of preconceived notions, but USA Facts does a really good job of just charting that all out. I've sent it to a few friends and they received it well, because it's just data. So, like I said, we'll send those out, but you'll see what they kind of don't have access to much of anything. Unauthorized migrants, the one thing, they get to pay taxes. That's one of their green boxes. And then another thing is that their children can attend public K through 12 for education. And then I think, Bill, you put a note on here that I think is important to mention. What was it? Oh, the voting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to say?
Yeah. Just also, if you notice at the bottom, listed only citizens, so not even green card holders who are considered permanent residents can vote in federal elections. So just another, clarifications. I know that's also another myth that's been spread around. So myth number 10, I want people to immigrate here, but I just think they should do it legally. The truth is that getting into the States is very difficult, and getting through that process of becoming a full U.S. citizen has a lot of barriers, takes years, and it's very difficult. So we actually wanted to invite Pastor Angel from Third Reform to come and speak. He's a U.S. citizen and went through that process, so we'd love you to come up and tell us your experience. So Pastor Angel.
Gracias. I brought my notes here, but I know this story very well in my heart. My name is Angel Lopez. I was born in Chiapas, Mexico, near to, we say Guatemala, but you say Guatemala, near to Guatemala, and like 4 hours from Guatemala, so you have an idea where I'm from. I was raised in the jungle of Chiapas, and it was the best time of my life as a child, hunting and swimming in the river, running, and it was awesome. But chronologically, I am the generation of 9/11 in terms of immigration. In 2001, I was in the middle of my, I was studying social anthropology at my university, and life was good. And I have no plans to leave my jungle. I have plans to marry there, raise my children, raise my chickens there, pigs, and continue to live there. And I said to myself, well, I speak the language, several languages there. We speak different language there. I was speaking Spanish, no problem. I speak in Chol, Celtal. So I say, well, that's good. However, you have no idea what laws will make you do. So I'm a generation 2001 in terms of immigration, because I said that because that will define my personhood. That will define my status. There was this idea, if you know what happened in 9/11, most of here, you know what happened here, right? So there was an attack, a terrorist attack into American soil. And the theory in Mexico, or from the United States to Mexico, on the news was that through our border, those people came through. We cannot challenge it. There was no evidence, but there was a strong, long border, and they say, yep, it's through them. It's through this long border that those people came and hurted us. Which that means for us, for this generation after 9/11, is that we cannot apply for a visa. No Mexican was allowed to apply for an American visa. Before 9/11, you can travel from here, from Mexico to United States and go anywhere in the world. It was cheaper to get a flight from here to anywhere in the world. 9/11 said no, not anymore. So basically the border was closed. And I said, well, no problem. I have this idea, my life is here, so Mexico is beautiful and bigger. There is no reason to travel. However, I met a beautiful, beautiful lady, a Canadian, an American, Canadian American, and that changed my world. We began to think about to get married, and we started these dreams to get married, and we said, well, let's do it. We have no idea what we're saying. Most of the time, we don't know what we're saying when we are in love. But certainly, we have no idea what this implication of this love was. So, till we began to apply for a marriage license, we cannot, after 6 months, we couldn't get a license, marriage license in Mexico, nor in the United States, nor in Canada, nobody. So my story, the story of our love with my wife, Janelle, almost ended in Mexico City. In Mexico City, there is an angel of an independence in the middle of the city of Mexico City. And that's where we were when we said to each other, we just finished an interview with the USA Embassy in Mexico City. And we cried. And the angel is our witness. And I said to her, Janelle, I love you so much, but if you say no, I will not be mad at you. I will be happy for you to go back to your country, because there is no way we can get married legally here. You can say no, and you can get a gringo, an American over there with beautiful eyes and taller than me. You can find somebody there, but you can do it. You have my permission, you have my blessing. So, but you need to decide it, because I cannot see my life suffering every time we need to do something with this Mexican and this American to go through life and to always struggling with papers. She was crying too, and she said, Angel, tell me, if you don't want to go through this, we had no marriage license in that moment either. Just tell me. I'll forgive you. And I said, I will forgive you too. But we have to be sure if we want this life, because our life will not change. If we get married, it will not change. It will get worse. So we were crying and crying and crying. At the end, said, no, I love you so much. And she said, I love you so much. Let's do it. And we did it. So in 2003, finally, after a lot of hurdles, we married in 2003, and we got a license far away from Mexico City. We found it in a corner close to our house in Chiapas. A judge that was willing to marry us legally, so we got married. So then, for some reason, for a job reason, we moved from Mexico to Canada. We couldn't get any visa. As a Mexican, I couldn't get a visa to travel from Mexico, USA, Canada. So now we bought a ticket from Mexico City to Toronto, from Toronto to Vancouver. Everything became very expensive for us. I feel really bad for her to pay a lot of money, but we did it. So to get a visa, at that time, it took me 4 times. It was very expensive. It was a lot of time. We lost our first ticket from Mexico, USA, Canada. We lost it. So we bought another ticket. Because every time we went to this visa, to these interviews, just for a visa, we always show with tickets in hands. Always. You always show your bank statement. You always show your job and your address and picture of family every time you go there. So every time we went there, we spent a lot of money. So it was 3 times, then 4 times, then finally they gave us a visa just to travel. But for some reason, we didn't use it. Anyway, at the end of the day, we traveled from Mexico, Toronto, Vancouver. Then, for some reason too, we moved to Canada. And I said, well, we're moving to Canada. I don't speak English, but let's do it. Because I love you, and she loves me, and she proved, and I proved that we love each other. So we went to Canada, and there was no tortillas there. During those 7 years, I met only 5 Latinos in Vancouver, British Columbia. I was suffering. I was crying. So we applied. Janelle said, my wife Janelle said, if we cross the border and we go to Seattle, we can have tortillas. I said, we can have chiles too. So let's try for a visa, for a tourist visa. So we began again a process of getting a visa from Canada to the United States. And again, as a Mexican, I needed to prove. They saw my passport, Mexican passport, and they said, well, we need a lot of documentation. Among them, you have to have $10,000 in your bank account, and you have to have all the statement, all that. So I have to have $10,000 minimum there. I have to prove that I was married legally to this beautiful woman, and I have to prove that those 2 beautiful girls were my daughters too. Because they didn't look like me, but sometimes they looked so much than me. Sometimes they didn't look like me, and sometimes people thought that Janelle was not her mom. It's in Canada. So I tried 3 times. And 3 times we paid for an interview in Canada. 3 times we failed again. Again, we prove with money, with time, with merit license, with everything, and with our 2 daughters as well. We bring them to an interview. One thing that I realized is that endurance in our families was a very important trait that we needed to have in order to live this life. We tried one more time for the 4th times, 4 times, and they gave me a visa. This was 3 years after I immigrated to Canada. So I was very happy, awesome. I was so happy that I got my visa, and they put it in my Mexican passport. And then I realized that the time of expiration was like in 2 months. They gave me for 6 months, but all those process only gave me 2 months to cross the border. So on the first time, we went to Seattle. I was so excited. For the first time, I'm going to the United States of America, the land of the free and the brave. And then I'm crossing the border of Canada and the United States, and they stop me. They see my passport, they see my visa, and they say, "You need to come with us." So I stay in the Canada border, USA border for 2 hours. I was detained there for 2 hours. My wife and the children was wondering what happened to you, to me, and they were worried that there will be a deportation. At the end, they said, "No, you can go." We crossed probably 3 times, and every time the time of this interview became 1 hour and a half, and then an hour, then half an hour, and usually was half an hour for me to cross. So we crossed a lot because I needed to have tortillas with me. So it was worth it, but it was pain in my back, and because I was sitting in a cell, waiting. It was horrible. At the first time, it was horrible. So, and then after the visa for 2 months, I said, we need to apply for a different visa. But then an opportunity came, and I was called to ministry. So I wanted to study seminary. So we applied for a F1 visa, or you call it a student visa, from Mexican in Canada to study in the United States. It was crazy because I need to prove now my education in Mexico. It was to prove now why I'm staying in Canada, and then why I'm moving to or wanted to study in the United States. It took us 6-8 months to prove all that. At the end, they give us this F1 visa. You should know that at that time I was married to a USA, I was permanent resident in Canada also. I have 2 dual citizen children, Lorena and Miriam. And so it was a lot to do. I brought all the passports from Canada, Mexico, and the United States. So it was always tricky to prove everything, that it was true, that I was Mexican, that they were Canadians. They were Mexican too, like, I don't know, it's weird. And then finally I crossed the United States of America from Canada in 2011 into Holland, to here, to arrive in Holland, Michigan. And then they gave me a passport. They gave me a permission to enter in another. They gave me another visa, and this visa said where are we going, what seminar we're going, and for how long. So this is tricky when you don't know the language and you don't know if you're gonna pass or fail your credits. English is my fourth language. You should know. So learning a fourth language was like tricky. And I said, well, I have 3 years to accomplish it. I cannot fail. I cannot fail any courses. Also, it will cost me a lot. Also, I cannot go back, though has a double, second thought to go back to Mexico or to Canada. I had nothing in Canada, nothing in Mexico. Everything I have is with me. So I had to pass. There was a pressure for me to pass everything. So I passed. It was horrible. 3 years learning English at the seminary level was horrible, but at the same time was beautiful, because at the end I feel like I can do this. There was friends, there was family, there was wife too. So we finished seminary. And then during that time, I said, well, what are we going to do? I have nothing. I have no money, We don't have no money, we don't have no dollars, we have a lot of debts, and we have no prospect. There's no way we can work here. I realized, and my wife realized, she's also a pastor, realized that she and I, we were not a good combination, and especially in the church. A Latino pastor and a female pastor finding a job in this environment at that time was very difficult. And I don't know, still is, but it was tricky. Anyway, we carry on, we find it, and they said, well, let's apply for a green card, what you call a green card. And we applied for a green card in 2014. It took us 8 months to apply. We finally applied. We finally got our green card after a year and a half. So during that time, I couldn't work either. I did not have a social security number for me to work. So I was not making money. So what can I do in order for me to become a legal person to be able to work? It was to become a citizen. So green card helped me a little bit. There's a lot of things for Mexicans here that doesn't apply to other Latin Americans, but in that time, it was very difficult for Mexicans to get that green card, but I got it. But then there was a lot of hurdle for me to get a job. So we applied for a citizenship. I got my citizenship in 2019. So finally, on May 16, 2019, I became a US citizen. They made me swear that I will have an allegiance to the United States, and all my flags and all my belief in my country was torn apart that day. It is hard to receive a congratulation. It was hard to deny who I am, who I was, and who I becoming. Somebody that I'm still struggling with my English, with my accent. And everybody who can see me and know about Mexican, they know I'm a Mexican. And even today, with my passport, I still am worried that people don't understand that it is very hard to become a US citizen in the United States. So in 2019, I said, I'm free. Finally, after 16 years of fighting with this system, I'm free. I can do whatever I want. And then the police stopped me in Holland and said that. Anyway, it was hard with the police saying that. I don't know. It was hard. But anyway, it is complicated. It is complicated to become a US citizen. Just to finish my story of love with my wife, I love so much, and you have to know that we have like 3 different weddings in our life, and she said to me, you should know that if we divorce, we need to travel to all these countries again. So it's gonna be hard, our divorce. But we love each other, and we are ready to continue. But here's a couple of things that you should know. Every time I apply, or we apply as a family for any type of visa, either in Mexico for her, either in Canada for me, and United States, we were not allowed to leave the country during that time. 6 months, 3 years, 4 years, I was not allowed to leave the country. Except when I got my citizenship, I was allowed to leave the country less than 6 months. That was it. Second, Every time you start an application for a visa, you start from scratch. You start from zero. I have to prove every time that I'm Jose Angel Lopez Dominguez and my wife is Janelle Cojas and my children are Lorena and Miriam. Every single time. Every single time I had to pay for the fee for every single time. If I trying to find me in United States, Canada and United States, they will find me easily. I put my print probably 12 times in all the process. They know my fingerprints. They fingerprint me in every single border that I went. So they have my so if people are complaining, oh, I need to, they asked me for my fingerprint twice already. I said, don't worry, they will ask you for more times. And being married to an American citizen, in my case, didn't mean anything. So there's the myth too, like if you're married to an American, beautiful American or handsome American, you are there. And then there's also a tricky part from USA Patrol. They always say don't marry to a foreigner. To Janelle say don't marry to a Mexican all the time, and they didn't serve her anything. They didn't provide any information to her. They deny rotundamente. They say no, don't marry, and they will not give you any documents. So that doesn't help. That didn't help to me all 16 years being with her. Another thing is that I had to have a sponsor. They did not accept my wife as a sponsor in my case. So I need to have a sponsor. So there was a family member from Janelle that I love so much, and they trust me and they accept me, and she provided that sponsorship for me. It was very, very expensive. And the last thing is that there's two occasions that hurt the most when you are in United States too, because you cannot leave in the middle of the process. You cannot leave to your country. Is that the Christmas are very painful to be here on Christmas. So please, if you know somebody from another country and is a Christian, please stay with them or invite them. I was not invited a lot of time. There's a lot of churches in Holland, but I was not invited most of the time. So invite them, please. And the second one is of this thing is that the most tragic part too, as a human being, is that most of the time somebody died in your country. And that's really, really painful to the point that you wonder, is this worth it? Is this worth it? My mom just died, my dad just died, my grandpa and my dad, all these people that you love so much, you say, you know what, can I ask permission to the government to go see my mom? And you decide, well, if I leave, I start from zero again. Or I cannot get to United States back. So it was very hard. And it has been hard. And as pastor, I always trying to be with them in the sense that somebody died, we're gonna be with you. So those are the two occasions that I would say, please be with them in Christmas and also when somebody died. And 16 years of this, basically to be able, as a Mexican, in my case, to get an American passport. The same day I went to the U.S. Embassy, they cut my passport, and they canceled the other one. And it is. I went with those two passports in all my travel, and they prove where I have been, who I am. That day they cut it, canceled it. And they give me another paper, and then at the end they said, renounce to everything you are. And I became an American citizen. This passport means that I am a citizen of United States of America. Without this and without the what you're swearing, those two things at the end, you are not a U.S. citizen in the United States. So thank you for listening to my story, and thank you for Emmy and Bill for allowing me to share a little bit of who I am, who I was, and who I'm becoming in Holland, Michigan. Gracias. Anyone else? If they want to say it.
Thank you so much. If you had to guess,
Oh.
one other question I have. Maybe other people have questions.
Oh, yeah,
You mind
yeah,
saying it
please,
for a second?
please,
Maybe
please.
people have questions. One question I have. If you had to guess or ballpark, how much do you think you spent in fees and applications over that period of time, and lawyers, court fees?
Most of the time we didn't use lawyers, and that helped us a little bit. Lawyers were charging $5,000 at that time. I remember that I paid for the citizenship just ballpark was $3,000 for the citizenship. So, but I applied probably for visas 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. So we traveled to the embassy. That's a cost of transportation. We travel sometime and stay overnight there. So let's put it like every time we apply was about $5,000, $3,000 to $500. Either in Mexico was US dollar, even though we were in Mexico, but in Canada was Canadian dollars as well. So it was different.
Somebody else have other questions for Pastor Angel?
Please ask anything. Really, this is your time. If I know, I'll tell you. Yes,
So I know you married the love of your life,
amen.
but is it worth it?
Amen, yes.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and we were watching. We had a pictures. I don't know now. We have picture on the phone, but we had a printed picture of when we met for the first time a couple of days ago because I needed to have dates, and my daughter was there and she was laughing at us because we were very skinny and very handsome, beautiful. Not anymore. Yes, my 2 daughters make me so happy as well. Yes. See.
So you say Christmas, and obviously there's death in the family back home that they're unable to go, we're the hardest. And you, like you said, if you know somebody, be with them. How can we be with them in the most helpful way? Is it incorporating some of their culture? Is it just being? How can we best be there for them through the holidays?
Exactly. I don't know. Everybody has their own culture and tradition. But for me, the point was we are lonely. And it's so lonely in Holland. And it's so cold, literally so cold, that if we can have, for example, on the 24th or the 25th of December, somebody, for me, say, Angel, can you come and have hot chocolate with us? That meant for me a lot. Nobody did to me that. I was at seminary. I think they think I was close to God. Maybe, but I was not close to any of my neighbors. we had no money at all during or after I finished seminary. Every dollar was for my school, every dollar was for something else, and have nothing. So if somebody said, Angel, I brought $10 and you want to buy something for your daughter, I'm sure I will cry for that because I have nothing. So if people give a gift card for the children, that would be awesome too. So an aunt who is always very nice to us, they give us $25. And we didn't tell her, and she didn't know that, so don't tell her. But she didn't know that there was those $25 in Christmas was the only thing we had that day. So we bought something for the girls with that $25. So for me, not to be alone, to be lonely in those on the 24th, on the 25th, or the 1st of January, it is so important. And bring a friend, make chocolate, hot chocolate, make coffee, and and one thing I would say now is that Americans always worry about the food, but you should know that the most important food in my upbringing in the city of Palenque with my mom, we have a white bread, we call bimbo there. My mom bought ham, cheese, lettuce, tomatoes, and only on that occasion we had a sandwich. So every time you invite me for a sandwich, I always go back to my Christmas day because my mom did not use tortilla one day. It was unique. Like, oh wow, it's amazing. It is amazing, and it tastes so good. And so anyway, if you make a sandwich for that day, I think people would be happy. Yeah.
So along that lines, if we were to reach out to the seminary and find out if there's some a person, a couple, or a family there that doesn't have family in the area, would they be receptive to sharing that information, do you think?
There has to be some kind of relationship, you know. But if you have seminary student coming to your church, for example, contact them today. When it's Sunday, it's done. But next Sunday, say, hey, here's my number. I'm gonna make something on 24th, 25th. Would you come with us? You know, and that's the only way. If you call the seminary, it's real. Somebody is Emmy. Who's Emmy? But if you go in the church, yeah. Relationship is very important. Yes, another one.
Thank you.
Gracias. If you want to see the passport, I was curious for passport. You can touch it, see it.
Actually,
Thank you.
I do have a question about, so
Yeah.
your other passports are then invalidated, and it's now you just have the US as your only valid passport, that's why they cut it? Is that
Yes.
how it works?
Yeah. I believe they cut it because it was not expired yet. But you have another U.S. passport now, so we have to cut it.
For some
Say,
reason I thought you could have multiple passports. I don't know, like in movies.
Like dual citizenship.
Right, or dual citizenship.
you can have, but don't tell them. But you, in that day, it is a ceremonial or is a sign, you know, you are, they validate it, basically. You are now, of course, it sounds logic, but for me, it was painful because that was me. But it's not good anymore in their eyes. Yeah.
Bill, you were asking him about total costs.
Mhm.
My daughter just got married, and just in getting her husband to a green card was $20K.
Wow. Yeah, 20K for just the green card. Yeah. And I think also as part, I know a lot of the fees, we talked about this last week, but a lot of the fees associated have gone up. It used to be to apply for asylum was free. Now it's $100, and not only is it $100, but you have to reapply every year as you're waiting. You have to so then it takes years. So it's like you can just apply for asylum now. It used to be free. Now it's probably like $300-400. There's a court fee that used to be $100. That's now $900. You know, if you wanted to appeal your decision. So there's been a significant increase in the financial barriers this year as well, around everything around immigration.
You know, hearing you have to have 10,000 in your bank account, plus you have to have all that money to pay all those fees, you know, each time you have to try, and how can people do that?
Right. Yeah.
There's one more question.
Well, I just kind of wanted to see if I'm right on this. You came into Canada and then the United States, not because you were at hardship. Like, this was willing, right?
Mhm.
And it was that difficult. So I'm just trying to, like, knowing how hard it was for you, the people that are actually trying to get here, not in a good place. I can't even imagine now even more trying to do this.
Yeah, and one thing that Bill mentioned, political asylums are available to most people Latin American. Maybe not for all of them, but Mexican some of us can apply for political asylum, but we are disqualified most of the time because our country is huge, and also because we are very close to the United States. And one logic they said, I asked to our judge, why don't you allow us to apply political asylum? Basically because you have a stable government. And also, if we allow Mexicans to have political asylum, you know, for those who run by the cartel, killed by the cartel, we'll have half of the country half of Mexicans in the United States. So that's the fear, also.
So not that it's a illegitimate claim, but that'd just be too many legitimate claims.
Yeah. But, yeah. And my last thing I would say is that I work with a lot of migrants at the border of Mexico and United States, and I hope one day with Bill and Amy we can visit the border. Maybe next year.
Yeah. Plug for that too. Yeah.
You don't
Thank
need to have a visa.
Thank you. Really appreciate you coming. This was great to hear.
Thank you.
Your side.
Okay.
For the rest of the presentation today, we kind of wanted to talk about sort of like next steps, other ways to get involved, ways to advocate, which is Maggie's spiel.
And I'll go quickly because we're already at 5:18, and I think we set 5:30-ish as.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. And a lot of this we have. Well, again, we can provide the slides later if you're interested. Yeah.
So this is a perfect segue to the. I think we have about 10 ideas for some practical advocacy. Number one, consider your proximity. So just by having Pastor Angel here, I feel I'm just so moved by what you shared. And just by having that proximity with you, I think it's really transformational. So in thinking, how can Boulevard connect more with the migrant community here? And then just personally, what hand can you extend to neighbors? I also think don't underestimate the power of prayer in this area. There have been many times where I've prayed, just God, help me cross paths with people in these communities. And He has always answered me in that. So don't forget to pray that, because I know it can be tricky when we all have our communities, but to create that crossover. Recognizing blind spots, just recognizing our privilege. I even was sitting there thinking, I've been dragging my feet on getting passports for my children because of the cost and the headache, and why it's such privilege that I can just file the paperwork. So recognizing blind spots is a good step. Practicing mutual hospitality, kind of rejecting the notion that we're to, take in these people and have it be kind of a one-way street. Mutual hospitality is all about equally coming to the table and learning from, oh yeah, we're not afraid of crying babies. So your babies are welcome here. Just kind of rejecting that notion that we are supposed to come in and help people when really, clearly we have so much to learn from the community. Amplifying immigrant voices like we did here today. It's not that they're voiceless people, they just, sometimes it's about giving opportunities, setting aside ourselves, quieting ourselves, and amplifying voices of immigrants and listening to their stories. Actually, I just kept thinking of this Bible study, not to keep plugging this, but as I was talking to listening to Pastor Angel, this study is filled with immigrant voices and stories. So hopefully if you guys participate, you'll feel that way too. I mentioned praying, praying yourself, praying in community. We're gonna do more engagement here at Boulevard after these sessions to just kind of intentionally set aside time with people who care to get together and pray, but not forgetting to pray for leadership of our country and our communities. Number 6, get in your community. I've listed a few ideas here of groups that are doing things. But there's also, I'm involved with some online groups that are nationwide that provide me with a lot of good action items and just community and feeling like I'm not alone. I do want to note, I know we're short on time, but we put some literature from Bethany Christian Services on the table, and then there's some cards over by the water. We met with Chelsea, I forget her last name, but a lovely person over at Bethany named Chelsea who heads up their foster program for unaccompanied minors. They are really looking to grow their bench, their roster of approved sponsor families to take in unaccompanied minors. So those are minors that come to the border without their parents. Typically, it's like a 3-week commitment, but there's a lot of unknowns right now with everything, and so there's some question marks there, but they're really wanting to grow their bench of approved sponsor families because right now they're not having any accompanied minors, but they expect potentially with the next administration that there will be, these people who are suffering haven't disappeared, they're still there, so there will be a backlog of minors that will need loving homes. Did I miss anything on that? I gotta open up mine.
Add a little bit.
Yeah,
So
please.
these are kids that she's saying a lot of times what happens is a group tries to cross as a family, an entire group, and the parents, and then they get sent back. But unaccompanied kids don't get sent back by themselves. And so parents are making this heartbreaking decision to say, I can't make it into the US, but I can at least send you, here's the phone number of your aunt in Seattle. And so when you present yourself at the border, at a port of entry, give them this phone number, and we're going to reunite you with your aunt that you've never met, but at least you'll be in the States, right? It's a tough decision as a parent. So, but in that period of time, there's a period of time where they're finding the aunt, they're making sure the aunt is who she says she is, that they're checking the story, that these kids have to be somewhere. And so Bethany Christian Services was one of the hundreds of agencies across the country where they place these kids somewhere while they're checking the story out. Prior to this year, that process used to take about 3 weeks. And so signing up to be a foster parent meant, the full foster vetting like you would also for domestic foster. But these are kids coming across. And she said things like, don't have to speak Spanish. Google Translate works great. These are typically kids like 5 to 8 years old.
8 to 12.
8 to 12.
I'm looking at my notes.
Yeah. One of the things that's changed this year is that process now is way more complicated. That vetting process has become a lot more onerous. And they used to be, prior to this year, they were getting about 1,000 kids a month nationally. Now they're getting about 100 kids a month. And so if you spread that out over all the services, all the different foster groups that do this across the country, there's almost zero. I was like, how many did you get in October? She's like, none. So that's happening right now. But like Maggie said, if immigration policy changes, there's this pent up demand currently, I'm sure, of people with legitimate asylum and refugee claims who are now just not allowed in. So that's why Bethany is saying, okay, we have this opportunity, this breath right now to try and anticipate the next thing that's going to happen and try and get more foster families. They said they currently have 12. They would like to have, I think she said 3 or 4 more.
Yeah.
And that process takes 4 to 6 months. And so to be vetted as a foster family.
She said it can be as quick as 1 month if you're on it.
Yeah.
But typically the average.
Yeah.
The other thing she said that I think is interesting is, I don't know if anyone has ever done like domestic foster care, but you're allowed to have the children in the care of a trusted babysitter. It's up to the foster parent, but in this particular federal program, it has to be you. So it can be a little inflexible. So they're looking to also have people who are just willing to be approved babysitters for periods of time. And our task force here at Boulevard is good at stepping in and helping helping with kids. So we thought that might be worth mentioning in case anyone's interested. They also remove a lot of barriers. She said their schooling is done at the Bethany facility. So it's like a 7:45 drop off to a 4 o'clock pickup. All the children's doctor's appointments are handled there at Bethany, or they handle getting the kids to their appointments. And you also get a capacity pay for every day that you're an approved sponsor. I can't remember the number, but it was like $50 or $10 a day.
$10
It was
a
lot of
day
money
just to be on call.
just to be on call.
And if you are a foster, you can speak to $6 a day.
So we just thought we would provide that as a option if that speaks to you. We're working as a task force to figure out what can we offer people here at Boulevard to get involved, how it works for you. So if you do want to get involved, make sure you sign that sign-in sheet, and we can send you emails or add you to our text thread. Harnessing the power of your dollar. There are so many good immigrant-owned businesses, restaurants here in Holland. So just keeping them in mind before you go, to a Panera Bread. Love you, Panera. But, and then talking to your friends and family. This is something I started doing a few years ago, and it's really hard, and people can be, there's sometimes like a rub there, but I think it makes a big difference. So taking what you learned today or last week, what you continue to learn, and just have courageous conversations with people rooted in the truth and with grace. Keep learning. I listed some books here that either I've read or were recommended by some trusted sources. I put some Instagram accounts, not to be a typical millennial, but if you are on Instagram and you want to follow some trusted sources, these are some of my personal favorites. Women of Welcome is an amazing group. There are men in the group. It's not just women, but the cool thing about Women of Welcome is it's truly a nonpartisan group of women who just care a lot and are really rooted in biblical truth. Let's see. How are we doing on time? Oh, it's 5:29. So we'll send these slides out, but I just have a few other ideas of places I get information. Women of Welcome does a weekly newsletter that they email out, and it's just really well done with links, and they give some ideas of how to contact your representatives and give scripts. They kind of make it easy for you. Which brings me to our last point of just engaging in civic responsibility. I have my reps saved in my phone as contacts, so I can call them when I'm driving my kids to school or whatnot. Just not forgetting. I know some people say it doesn't make a difference, but I think it does. And if anything, it makes me feel like I'm doing something too. we'll send these slides out because we don't need to go over this, but just a little how-to if you've never contacted your elected officials. I put some tips that have helped me. We wanted to read, are we gonna do a closing prayer and this evening? Okay, we'll skip this. Before we close in prayer, does anyone have any thoughts or questions or anything that's on your mind?
So I do, just because I heard about this elsewhere. On how do you have a shelter in Mexico
Yeah.
that you run?
We do.
Yeah, and it used to serve like as a safe waiting place. And now you transitioned because the borders are closed.
In a way, yeah. But we still have.
You wanna come up and speak?
We have ministry at the border. We call it Frontera de Gracia or Border of Grace, and this is in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, across from El Paso, Texas, and that's where we are located. 7 minutes from the border, literally, and 7 minutes from U.S. Embassy in Mexico, and that's where we are. Right now, the numbers of immigrants have dropped dramatically, and we still have new immigrants coming every day, but not same number as 2019 or 2024. So we have less people, but we have a more permanent migrants staying in Frontera de Gracia. So hopefully you can visit us one day. Yeah, please pray for them.
So that would be another resource to aid people that are now there homeless because they want to come into America.
You have a construction project?
Yep. The other one, the dream that we have is that immigration is a sign that this world is a bit sick. It's an organic way of showing that our world is broken. The fact that we don't have a lot of immigrants coming to the border right now, that doesn't mean that this planet is well, or we are not sick anymore. So the Frontera de Gracia wants to rebuild the entire building to be more accessible, and also we believe that in 2 or 3 years we will have an influx of immigrants again. So next time they're coming, at least to Frontera de Gracia, we're gonna be ready for them.
I have a personal note. Josh, can you go get our kids? Because childcare is done at 5:30. Thank you. One other thought, but I just wanted to share. I know that this can be overwhelming because there's so many problems, but I just wanted to share that in our task force, it's a really organic process of everyone kind of fills a need. And so I just want to give that encouragement that if you feel like there's too much to take on, just take a little part of it. And if we all take a little part, it's going to get better.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wanna close this up.
Oh, sure. Okay, I'll pray us out. God, we are so thankful for your goodness. We know that amidst any chaos, you are our peace and our truth. Thank you for bringing us together tonight to wrestle with this complicated topic. Help us to remember that every single human being is created lovingly in your image. Help our leaders and policymakers remember this and make decisions that uphold and affirm the special dignity that you have bestowed on each and every one of us. God, we ask that when we are overwhelmed by witnessing the suffering of our neighbors, that we come to you for guidance on where you call us to show up and use our individual gifts and talents you've given each of us. Amen.